Hello folks, and welcome to GED Microlearning, where we help you pass your GED math. In today's video, we're going to go through 100 questions explained step by step, and it's arranged into 10 blocks of 10 questions each. So within each block, you'll have algebra, functions, geometry, decimals, etc. Okay, so the idea is that you get used to what the format of the exam looks like. And remember that the GED contains multiple types of questions, not only multiple choice. You also have drag and drop, fill in the blank, etc. So we'll go through all of that. And with that being said, let's go. All right, so question 1. Luke just opened a phone store. He makes $32 on every phone he sells, and his monthly expenses are $12,000. What is the minimum number of phones he needs to sell in a month to make a profit? Okay, so let's think this one out. So in order for him to make a profit, he has to subtract what he sells from his expenses. And all of this has to be more than $0. Okay, so if he were to break even, okay, so he doesn't make a profit, but he doesn't make a loss either, we would write the equation like this. And here, 32 represents what he makes per phone that he sells, okay, so $32, as they tell us in the question, and X represents the number of phones he sells. And then you would subtract $12,000 from that because that's the number of expenses. And we would make this equation equal to 0 because that represents him breaking even. Okay, so in order for him to break even, this has to equal 0. For him to make a profit, it has to be more than 0. Okay, so let's solve that equation of breaking even. So we would set up the equation like this, and now it's very easy, right? This is just a normal algebra problem. So the first thing that we're going to do is there on the left, we are going to add $12,000 to the left side. Remember that whatever you do to the left side, you have to do to the right side. Okay? And now on the left side, those $12,000 are going to cancel out. So that leaves us with this equation. And now it's very straightforward, right? So all you have to do now is solve for x. And you do that by dividing both sides by 32. Okay, so divide by 32 on the left, divide by 32 on the right. So now you just have x isolated on the left, and that gives us $375. But remember, we said that this is when breaking even. Okay, so he's not making a profit because remember, we set the equation equal to 0. So if you look at the answers, the correct answer wouldn't be C. It would be $1 more than that, so $376. All right, question 2. So a plumber charges a base fee of $40 per visit and $23 per hour for his labor. The total cost for a home visit and X hours of labor is represented by this function rule. And then it asks us to find C of X. All right, so let's just remind ourselves how you solve these problems, okay? So imagine that they give us this equation, and they give us this table there on the top right. So what this is telling you is this is basically an input-output system, meaning that if you take that value for x in the table, 0, and you plug it into the equation on the left, it's going to give you that y is equal to 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to plug in the number 0 where the x is, and I end up with that. So now we have 3 minus 2 times 0. So 2 times 0 is 0. So y is going to equal 3. All right, and all we have to do now is look at the value for x in the problem and then just plug it into our equation like that, and then that would give you 63. So your correct answer is C. And then, of course, if you want to check your work, you can see that the x value increases by a factor of 1 each time, right? So from 0 to 1, we add 23, which is what we saw before. Then if you add another 23, you get 86, and so forth. All right, question 3. So it says, plot a line given the ordered pairs 0 and 2, and then -5, -7. All right, so you have to remember that in the GED, aside from multiple choice questions, you will have questions where you have to actually interact with an image, maybe plot a line, and so forth. So pay attention to these questions as well. All right, so first of all, let's remind ourselves what an ordered pair is. So an ordered pair is a pair of numbers, as you can see there, and they're ordered, okay, in alphabetical order, so let's say. So the x value here would be the 5 because it's the first one, right? It's ordered. And then the second value would be y, okay? So this is a coordinate. So if we look back to the ordered pairs that they give us in the question, the first set of ordered pairs there in pink, the first value would be x, so x1 is equal to 0, and your second ordered pair would be 2. We do that for the second set of ordered pairs, which is -5 and -7, same sort of scenario. Okay, so now how do we go ahead and plot this on the graph? So an easy way to think about plotting graphs is to imagine compass rose, right? So in a compass rose, we have the horizontal axis, which is your west and your east, and then you have your vertical axis, which is the north and south. Okay, so in this case, the horizontal axis, the west-east, is your x coordinate. Okay, so if we go ahead and look at the coordinate, the x value we said is 2, so we would simply start at 0 and then move to the 2. And then the y coordinate is your north-south or vertical axis. Okay, so we're going to start there at 2 and then just follow it down to -4. All right, so this is where you would plot the first set of ordered pairs that you are given. All right, so that's the coordinate 2, comma, -4. All right, so if we go back to our question, the first set of ordered pairs is there in pink, and they're telling us that the x value is 0, right? So we would start there at 0. And then the y coordinate, which was the north-south, or the y-axis, vertical axis, is going to be 2. So we just go up there. All right, so we plot our first point there. Okay, so now we go to the second set of ordered pairs, and they're telling us that the x is -5, so that's our starting point, and then y is -7. So we just continue that down vertically to the -7, and we would put our second set of ordered pairs or our coordinate there. All right, so this is what plotting this graph would look like. All right, folks, so I'm going to put shameless plug for the channel. So if you're enjoying this, please give us a thumbs up or consider subscribing or share with friends. All right, so question 4. So remember that in the GED, you will have to be able to interpret a host of graphs, okay? In this case, it's a bar graph. So it's asking you what was the ratio of coffee to juice sold in shop 1. So let's first remind ourselves how to read a graph. So you have to have a system, okay? So the system that I use is this. First of all, you look at the title, which is telling you what the graph is about. So this is about beverages sold. Then you look at your y-axis, which is the vertical axis, and it's telling you the number of beverages sold. Then you look at your x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, and it's telling you information about shop 1 and shop 2. And then finally, you look at the legend there on the right. Okay, so this is telling you that the block in red represents coffee, the yellow represents hot chocolate, the green tea, and the blue juice. So in their question, they're asking us about shop 1, and specifically they want to know the ratio between coffee and juice. So if you look at the graph, everything in red we said was coffee, right? So from 400 to 550, that's 150 coffees sold. And then if we look at the juice, which was the blue color, you can see they've sold 50 juices. All right, so our ratio would be 150 to 50. Remember that whenever you have a ratio, you always have to simplify it to its lowest expression. And the way that you do that is that you take the common denominator between these two numbers. So in this case, the common denominator is 50. So you would divide both sides by 50 like that, and that gives you 3 to 1. Okay, so the answer is B. Question 5. Okay, so it says Vishen is building a square art piece where each side is 5x minus the minus 2 squared. if x3, excuse me, if x is equal to 3, what is the area of the art piece? Okay, so this is what they're asking you, right? So they're asking you what is the area of this square piece. And then they're asking you, remember that because they're asking you the area, you can find this information relating to the formula in the formula sheet that you're going to get in the exam, okay? So, so when you go onto the GED, for example, if you do it online, there's a formula sheet. When you click on that, you have all of these formulas associated to area. So if you look at the area of a square, that's the formula. So all you have to do now is introduce that x value that they're giving you in the question into the equation. Okay, so if you do that, on the left side you'll have 15, and then minus negative 4, excuse me, minus 4. All right, that gives you 9. So that's the first part of the story. The second part is that now with that value, so we know each side is going to be 9. Okay, so now all you have to do is find the area, plugging that number into that equation that you had in your formula sheet. Okay, so if you put 9 squared, that gives you 81. So the correct answer would be C. All right, question 6. Jake is a part-time hairdresser. This week he got paid $30 per haircut and $136 in tips. Which expression shows the number of haircuts he did this week if he earned a total of $680? Okay, so sometimes the GED will give you these problems where they're called setup problems. So they want to know that they're not necessarily asking you for the answer, they're asking you to find out how you would set up the problem to solve it. Okay, so let's get cracking. So if we look at how much Jake earned in a week, we would multiply what he gets per haircut, okay, so that's the fixed amount, multiplied by the number of haircuts he gives, plus tips. And that would give us the total that he earns. So we know that he gets $30 per haircut. We would multiply that by X, which is the number of haircuts he's going to give. And then they tell us that he earned 136 in tips, okay, so that's plus 136. And that would be equal to the total earned, which was 680. So if we look back at the answer options, you can see that answer option is not quite there, because this is what we got. So we just have to kind of simplify this expression a little bit more. And the way that we do it is we're going to go ahead and subtract 136 from the left side, and so that cancels out. Remember, what you do on the left side, you also do on the right side, and that gives you 30x is equal to 680 minus 136, which you notice is option B. Okay, so this question just involved you going a little step further to get the correct setup that they had put there in the answer option. All right, question 7. Okay, so question 7 asks you to simplify this expression, and this requires you to factor the expression. So let's just quickly recap factoring. All right, so when they ask you to factor an equation like this, here's a trick that can help you. If you look at the number on the right side, the whole number, the first step would be to find the numbers that multiplied together give you positive 6. Okay, so the factors of 6. So if you multiply negative 1 by negative 6, that gives you 6. If you multiply 1 times 6, that also gives you 6. 2 times 3 gives you 6. Minus 2 multiplied by minus 3 is equal to 6. Okay, so these are all the factors of 6. Step 2 is then to look at this number with the x value and then find the numbers that you found before that when they add together give you minus 5. Okay, so we said in the last example that minus 1 multiplied by minus 6 would give us 6. So if we add those two numbers together, they give us minus 7, so that's not the answer. If we do that for every single number, you notice there that in the last one, minus 2 multiplied by minus 3 gives us 6. And minus 2 plus minus 3 gives us minus 5. Okay, so these two numbers are going to be the factors of our equation. Okay, so we would factor the equation like this. Okay, and then always good to check your work, right? So what we would do is check your work using the FOIL method. So the FOIL method is just basically an acronym. The F stands for first, meaning that you multiply the first terms in that factor equation. So x times x gives you x squared, which is what you see in the original equation at the top. The O stands for outer, so you would multiply the outer terms. So x multiplied by -3 gives you minus 3x. The I stands for inner, so you would multiply that -2 by x, that gives you minus 2x. And the L stands for last, okay? So -2 multiplied by -3, that gives you positive 6. And then you just add those terms together, right? So minus 3x plus minus 2x, and that gives you this equation, okay? Which was the original equation that you had to factor. All right, so that's a very quick recap on factoring. So let's go ahead and do this for this problem. All right, so step 1, we want to find the factors of positive 20, meaning the numbers that multiply together would give you positive 20. And here they are below. And then the second step is we want to look at the middle number at the negative 9x and find the previous numbers that when added together, that's a mistake, not multiplied, but when added together give you negative 9. Okay, so so you can see that there at the bottom, in step 1, we said that minus 4 multiplied by minus 5 gave you positive 20, and you can see that when we add these numbers together, minus 4 plus minus 5 gives you minus 9. Okay, so those are going to be your factors. So you would simplify your equation like this, and now it's very simple. You can cross these two terms out, and you get x minus 5, which is option A. Question 8. A cell phone company is doing a survey looking at the number of text messages that we represent with the letter T that male and female high school students, not high school company students, send in a period of 3 months. Below are the formulas for both genders. Write an equation for the total number of students sending text messages in a 3-month period. All right, so first of all, remember that in the GED, you will get some questions that are not multiple choice. Some of them are fill in the blank like this. So you do have to, practice these questions as well. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to take these two equations telling us how many text messages females and males send. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine like terms. So what this means is that you're going to take all the terms that are similar. So you're going to add all the numbers that are raised to the power of 2, right, that have a square root. So you would add 2.06 t squared from the females plus 1.87 t squared from the males. That gives you that number. You're going to do the same thing with the second set of numbers that have the t. Okay, and that gives you that. And then finally, you're going to add the whole numbers, okay, like this. And that's basically it. You would then combine that equation, and that's what it would give you. So this is the equation for the total number of students, both male and female, sending text messages in a 3-month period. All right, so question 9 is a drop-down menu question. So again, sometimes you have these little drop-down menus instead of multiple choice, and this involves you reading a line graph with 2 lines. Okay, so it's asking what is the ratio of tea drinks to coffee drinks bought in February. So quick reminder, as always, read the title. This is telling you what this graph is about. In this case, it's about beverages bought at Sam's coffee shop. Then you're going to look at the y-axis, which is the vertical axis. And in this case, and I made a mistake and I didn't write it there, but this is the number of drinks. And then you look at the x-axis, which is the horizontal. It's telling you how much they sold each month. And then finally, you look at the legend there on the right. Okay, so that's telling you that the blue line represents coffee, the green line represents tea. So if we go ahead now, and they're asking us for February, so we can basically ignore this part of the graph, and we look at tea, there in the top, it's 3,000, and coffee is 2,250. Okay, so that's tea and that's coffee. So the ratio would be that. Remember that we always want to reduce ratios to their lowest expression. So what you want to do here is find a common denominator for both numbers. So I did 250, and then that gave me this number. So you can reduce it even further. So if I divide both numbers by 3, then the ratio becomes 4 to 3. Okay, so you always want to do the lowest expression. And all you have to do now is go to the drop-down menu and select the 4 and the 3. All right, so question 10 is a system of equations problem. So it says DJ runs a hot dog stand at a basketball game. He sells hot dogs and nachos. Each hot dog costs $1.75 and nachos cost $3. At the end of the night, he sold 30 items combined and earned a revenue of $78.75. How many bowls of nachos did he sell? All right, so these questions can seem a little bit tricky because you have to set up two equations and then kind of feed them or introduce them into each other. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to set your variables and your first equation. Okay, so they're telling us in the problem that he sells hot dogs and nachos. So we're just going to call your hot dogs X and your nachos Y. And they tell us that he sold 30 of these items combined. Okay, so we would say X plus Y is equal to 30. And now all you have to do is just isolate one of those variables. Okay, so in this case, we're going to isolate X. Okay, so we're going to say X is equal to 30 minus Y. Okay, so that's equation 1. We're just going to leave this for a second, and now we're going to set equation 2. So here you want to set the cost of the items and the profit. So they're telling us in the question that the hot dogs cost $1.75. So we're going to multiply that by X, which is the number of hot dogs, plus 3 multiplied by Y. So the 3 represents the cost of the nachos, and the Y represents the number of nachos sold. And all of this is going to be equal to the total revenue, which was $78.75. Okay, so now that you have your two equations, what you're going to do is you're going to introduce equation 1, which appears there in blue, into equation 2. Specifically, you're going to introduce it where the X value is. Okay, so if you look at the equation, it says $1.75 X. So where you have that X, you're going to plug that blue information in, okay, like that. All right, so the next step is to use the distributive property. So what this means is that you're going to multiply 175 multiplied by 30, there in blue, minus 175 multiplied by Y. Okay, so this is what that equals. All right, and now the next step is to clear the equation up a little bit. So what you're going to do is you're going to add these like terms, simplify them. So you end up with this, and now all you have to do is solve for Y. Okay, so what we do is we're going to subtract 52.5 from the left side. Remember that what you do to the left, you have to do to the right, and that gives us this number. And now all we have to do to isolate Y is divide both sides by 1.25, like that. And that gives us that Y is equal to 21. Okay, so he sold 21 bowls of nachos. Always good idea to check your work. So, oh, kind of a messy equation there. All right, so so if we take this equation, our first equation, right, which was X is equal to 30 minus Y, and we introduce the value that we got for Y in the equation, that is going to give us X is equal to 9. Okay, so that means that he sold 9 hot dogs and 21 nachos. And you can also check by the amount of, to see if the revenue adds up, right? So he sold 21 bowls of nachos at $3 each. So if you multiply that, that gives you $63. And he sold 9 hot dogs at $1.75, which gives you $15.75. If you add these two up, that gives you the total revenue that he earned. All right, question 11. Sarah made an online course. She made $470 in January, $905 in February, $523 in April. She wants to have at least $500 left to go on holidays during spring break. She withdraws $27 per month to pay utilities and $63 to pay for cable. If she wants to have at least $500 left for her holidays, what is the maximum number of months she can withdraw from the account? Okay, so these problems, the first thing that I suggest is that you just tidy everything up because there's a lot of kind of moving pieces here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the profits. Okay, so let's find out how much she made from her online course in January, February, and April. All right, so that's how much she made. Then we also want to find out how much from this profit amount she withdrew, right? So we would add the $27 that she pays for utilities plus the $63 for cable. Okay, so it's $90 per month. All right, and then you want to go ahead and set up your equation. So this is what the equation would look like. So we have what she made as a profit. We would subtract that by the amount that she's withdrawing every month. Okay, so we said it's $90 multiplied by X. Okay, X months, because we don't know if it's 2 months, 5 months, 20 months. And then we say that that all of this has to be greater than or equal to a certain amount, or the money that she has to have left. Okay, and that was $500, remember. Okay, so all of this on the left side has to be greater than or equal to $500, because that's what it says in the question, that she has to have at least $500 left to go on holidays. Okay, so now you have your equation set up, right? So 1,898 was the profit minus the withdrawals, which was $90 multiplied by X, the number of months, and all of this has to be together has to be greater than or equal to $500 left so that she can go on holidays. All right, and all you have to do now is just solve this like a usual algebra problem. So on the left side there, we would subtract the 1,898. Remember, we have to do the same thing on the right side. And that gives us this amount. And now to isolate x, we would divide both sides by minus 90. And that gives us this amount. So notice that when I divided by the minus 90, the sign, the direction of the sign changed, right? So initially it was greater than or equal to, and now it's less than or equal to. So the reason for this is that there is a rule that says that when you divide by a negative number, the sign is going to change direction. Okay, so don't forget that because it can trip you up. All right, so basically she can live on these profits for 15 months and 53 days and still have $500 left for her holidays. Okay, so the correct answer would be answer D. Okay, question 12 is another factoring question, so hopefully you'll remember from the one we did before, and this should be pretty straightforward, but just to recap once again, remember when you factor equations like this, you're going to look at the number on the right and find out all the factors, meaning all the numbers that multiply together give you that number. There they are. And then you're going to look at the number there in the middle with the x and find out which of the numbers that you found before, which of the factors that you found before, when you add them together, give you that number, in this case, minus 5. Okay, so there on the left, you have the numbers that we found in step 1. Okay, so the factors of positive 6. And then on the right side, you have those numbers again, but in this case, we're adding them together. Okay, so you have to find the combination that added together would give you minus 5, which is that number on the right. All right, and that would be your factors. And then all you have to do is remember, check your work using the FOIL method, where you multiply the first terms together, the outer terms together, inner terms, and the last terms. And then you add all of those common terms, and that would give you your equation. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do this for this number. So first of all, find all the numbers that multiplied together give you positive 12. Those are all the numbers. And then find which of these combination of numbers, when added together, is going to give you positive 7. Okay, so if we go ahead and do that, you can see that the magic number there is 3 and 4. All right, so our correct answer would be B. Once again, always useful, especially at the beginning. Check your work. So using the FOIL method, as we said before. So if we go ahead and do that, multiply the first items together. So x multiplied by x is x squared. Then the outer terms, which would be x and 4, that gives you 4x. Inner terms, which would be 3 and x, that gives you 3x. And the last terms, which would be 3 and 4, that gives you 12. If we add all of these terms together, right, so you multiply the 4x and the 3x together, that gives you this number, which you can see is the initial expression that you had to factor. All right, question 13. So as we said before, the GED is not all multiple choice questions. You do have some questions where you actually have to interact with an image. For example, putting a point on a number line or on a graph. So this is a two-step process, basically. So here they're asking you to plot the result of the following expression on the number line. So first of all, we're going to deal with the expression. So that's the expression. The first thing that you want to do is that you want to use the distributive property to kind of simplify this. This kind of the first step of simplifying, okay? So you're going to take on the left side that negative sign, and you're going to multiply it by everything inside the parentheses, okay, like this. And you're going to do the same thing on the right side. So you're going to multiply that negative 6 by everything in the parentheses, like that. So when you do that, you have to be careful with the especially with the negative signs, but this is what you will end up with, right? So on the left side, you end up with 6x minus x plus 1, okay, because a negative sign multiplied by a negative 1 gives you a positive 1. And then if you do the same thing on the right side, you end up with minus 6 minus 6x plus 7. All right, so now you're going to want to go ahead and tidy things up. All right, so on the left side, we're going to subtract 6x minus x, which would give us 5x plus 1. And then on the right side, we're going to take the whole numbers, so minus 6 plus 7, and that gives you plus 1. Okay, so that's the simplified expression. And now all you have to do is simplify for x. Okay, so there on the right side, I'm going to add 6. Remember that what you do to the right side, you have to do to the left side. So there on the right side, those 6's are going to cancel out. And then on the left side, I end up with 11x plus 1 is greater than 1. Now I want to get rid of that 1 on my left side, so I'm going to subtract 1, do the same thing on the right side, cancel us out, and that is the expression. And now I have to isolate the x by dividing both sides by 11, like this. So that gives me that x is greater than 0. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. And now what you have to do is plot this on the graph. So all you would have to do is click on your line bar on the line with an open circle like that, signifying x is greater than 0. All right, so just a quick recap. There's a difference between having an open circle or a closed circle. So if you have an open circle, it's telling you that this means greater than. But if you have a closed circle or shaded in, this is telling you greater than or equal to. Okay, so just be aware of that as well. All right, so in this question, they're asking you for what is the value of these three numbers that have exponents multiplied together. All right, and it looks a little bit scary, right, because you have a lot of exponents with negative terms, and you also have that negative exponent. What the heck is that, right? So let's first of all remind us ourselves what this means. All right, so whenever you have an exponent that is negative, what this is telling you is that you have to divide that base number, in this case x, it means that you're going to divide this whole expression like this. Okay, so whenever you see a negative exponent, you have to rewrite it like this. So if we go back now to our equation, notice that we have two expressions with negative exponents. So if we do 5 raised to the negative 1, that would be actually 1 over 5. If we do the same thing for 2 raised to the negative 3, that's what it would translate to. Okay, so now the next question is, what is 500 raised to the power of 0? So whenever you have an exponent, which is a 0, right, where the base is raised to a power of 0, whether that's 1 raised to the 0 or another number, this is always going to equal 1. Okay, so 1 raised to 0 is 1. 500 raised to the power of 0 is also 1. And this is just a rule that you have to remember. Okay, so whenever you see a 0 exponent, just remember that is equal to 1. So now that's pretty simple. That's what you end up with, and all you have to do is just multiply across. So 1 over 5 is 1 over 5, multiplied by 1 over 8, okay, which is 2 raised to the third power, by 1. Remember that when you multiply fractions, you just multiply everything across. So on the top, on the numerator, 1 times 1 times 1 would be 1. And in the bottom, 5 multiplied by 8 multiplied by 1 is 40. Okay, so that's your answer, 1 over 40, which is option D. Okay, question 15 requires you to look at a bar graph and then get some information from it to answer the question. Okay, so it says Rick works at a barber shop. They charge $25 per haircut. How much did they earn from haircuts in June? All right, so excuse me, once again, look at the graph and let's analyze what it's telling us. So first, look at the title. Okay, that's telling you what this data is about. In this case, they're talking to us about haircuts. Then you want to look at your y-axis. This is telling you the number of haircuts. Okay, so there was between 0 and 100 haircuts. The x-axis is telling you the months. Okay, so the haircuts in April, in May, in June, July, etc. And in the question, they're asking us for June. Okay, so you're going to follow that bar to the top and then to the left. And you can see there that there were 50 haircuts in June. So all you have to do now is multiply those 50 haircuts by $25 each. That gives you $1,250, which is option B. All right, so this question is a slope question. So it says, given 5x plus 2y is equal to 64, find the slope. All right, and let's remind ourselves a little bit. Let's do a quick recap on slope equations. So in the GED, you can expect to find mostly these two equations, right? So what we call standard form, where you have an equation that looks like this, ax plus by is equal to c, or the y-intercept form. And remember that in the y-intercept form, m represents the slope. So what we want to do in this question is that we want to change it from the standard form to the y-intercept form, okay? Because if we have it in the y-intercept form and we know that the value for m is equal to the slope, then it's, pretty straightforward. All right, so we're going to take that equation and we're going to transform it into the y-intercept form. So what we're going to do is we're going to isolate y basically on the left side. So in order to do that, we're going to start isolating, getting rid of the x. So we would add 5x, subtract 5x on the left side, do the same thing on the right side. And the reason is so that we can eliminate the x's on the left. That gives us this expression. And now all we have to do to isolate the y is divide both sides by 2. Okay, so now you have your equation in y-intercept form. And remember, as we said before, that in y-intercept form, in this equation, the letter b represents the slope. Okay, so your slope is going to be minus 5 over 2, which is answer C. Okay, so the next question asks you to plot a line given the two ordered pairs. And we went over this very exhaustively in question 3. So I'm just going to do the question straight up. I'm not going to review anything. If you have questions, go back to question 3. Okay, so remember that the ordered pairs are basically coordinates, okay, where the first value is the x value and the second value is the y value. So if we look at the first coordinate pair, 3, 2, it's telling you that in the first pair of ordered pairs there in pink, the value is going to be 3 for x and 2 for y. So we would go to the 3 value there until we get to the 2. That's the 3, 2 coordinate. And then for the second value, -5, -3, we know that the x value is -5, right? So we would start up here, and then the y is -3, so we'd come down there. That's our point, okay? And then you would plot the line like that. All right, question 18. Jake is building a path using stone slabs. Each stone slab is 24 centimeters long and 10 centimeters broad. How many slabs are required to lay a path that is 2,400 centimeters long and 1,500 centimeters broad? All right, so I personally really like to visualize the problem first, right? So this is the scenario. You have this path, which is going to look like a long rectangle like that. And then you have these bricks or slabs, right, that you are going to have to introduce into the path. And what they want to know is how many of these slabs do you now have to kind of introduce into the path like that. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to find out the area of both of these rectangles, okay? So meaning the path, which is a long rectangle, and the slab, which is a smaller rectangle. So if you go to your formula sheet, which is provided for you in the GED, and you look at the area of a rectangle, there it is. It's length times the width. So if you go ahead and find the area of the rectangle for the slab or the brick, all you would do is multiply the length and the width. So 24 times 10, that's 240. And then you're going to repeat the same thing for the path. Okay, so you multiply the length times the width, and that gives you this number. All right, so now that you have the area of both of these rectangles, you have to find out the number of slabs. So in order to do that, what you do is you're going to divide the area of the path that you just found, divided by the area of each of these slabs. Okay, so you divide those two numbers that you just found out. That gives you 15,000 slabs, which is option D. All right, so question 19 is a scientific notation problem, and it's asking you to write this expression in scientific notation. So let's quickly remind ourselves what scientific notation is and what it means. So remember that in scientific notation, when you have a positive number there, what that's telling you is that if you were to write this in like whole numbers, so not in scientific notation, you would move the decimal point to the right. Okay, so this, if we write it in just whole numbers, so not scientific notation, we would move the decimal point 3 spaces to the right. So 1, 2, and 3. So this number is actually equal to 3,700. Okay, so that's if the exponent is positive. All right, so what happens if the exponent is negative? Well, what that's telling you is that in this case, the decimal is going to move to the left. So if we rewrite that, not in scientific notation, we would start there at 3.7, right? And then move the decimal to the left 3 spaces. So 1, 2, and 3. So this number is equal to that number in scientific notation. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our question, and you can see that, that it is a positive number up there in the question. So that means that option D and option C are probably not going to be correct, okay, because that would give you a very small number. It would be 0.00167, something like that. Okay, so it's probably going to be option A or option B. So if we go ahead with option A and we rewrite that not in scientific notation, right? So we have this number raised to the power of 4, and it's a positive 4. We would move that decimal 4 spaces to the right, right? So 1, 2, 3, 104. And that would give us 167,800. Okay, so that is option A. All right, question 20 is a combined figures question. So here it's asking you, Jake wants to carpet his room. He chooses a carpet that costs $9 per square foot. How much will it cost? Okay, so this is a kind of a three-step problem. All right, so whenever you see a combined figure like this, a lot of students, get really stressed because they're like, I've never seen this figure before. But what you have to realize is that they're combined figures. Okay, so there's actually three figures here. On one side you have a rectangle, in the middle you have a square, and then on the right side you have a half circle. And what you have to do is you have to find out the area of these three different shapes to find the combined area. Okay, so let's start with the square. So as you know, squares, the sides of the square are always the same, right? So there on the top you have 14, which means that on the right side it's also going to be 14. Here in the bottom it's also going to be 14. And then on the left side the length is also going to be 14, okay? So what that's telling you is that that little bit at the top that we didn't know what it was is going to be 6, okay? Because 4 plus 6 is 14. Okay, so now the area of the square, if you use that formula there on the top right, it would be 14 squared, which is 196. All right, so you've done the first part. Now you're going to do the same thing for the rectangle. So what we found out in the previous question is that this little side that was left had the value of 6, okay? So now all you have to do is find out the area of this rectangle by using the equation there on the top right. Okay, so if we multiply 5 times 6, that gives us 30. All right, and the final part that you have to do is find out the area of that half circle on the right. And what you're going to use is this equation. Okay, so remember that that little symbol that you see there that looks like a table is called pi, and the value of pi is 3.14. Okay, so you're going to put 3.14 multiplied by the radius, which there in the image they tell us it's 10, squared, and then divided by 2. Okay, so if you go ahead and solve for that like this, you end up with 157. All right, so now you've got the areas of those three figures, and what you want to go ahead and do now to find the total area is simply add these three areas together. Okay, so 196 plus 30 plus 157 gives you 383 squared feet. And remember that in the question, they're telling us that you can buy carpet, 1 square foot of carpet for $9. So you would multiply that number by $9. Okay, so 383 multiplied by 9 gives you 3,447. So your answer would be answer D. All right, so before moving on to the next block of questions, just one key idea from this section. So remember scientific notation. If you have a positive number, remember that that decimal is going to move to the right. If it's negative, remember that you would move the decimal to the left. All right, next question. Alex drives 40 miles in a straight line due west from his workplace to the gym. After the gym, he drives 20 miles in a straight line due north to get home. What is the distance from his house to his work if he travels in a straight line? Okay, so for this sort of problem, the best thing that I find useful is to kind of visualize the problem, right? So he's at work and he's gonna drive due west 40 miles to the gym. Okay, so that's what he's doing. Then once he finishes at the gym, they tell us he drives due north 20 miles to get home. And then the question is asking us what is the distance from his home to his work if he travels in a straight line. Okay, so that's what they're asking. So as you can see here, essentially this makes a right angle triangle. And what they want you to know or to think about is this theorem called the Pythagorean theorem, okay, where if you get the squares of the two sides of the triangle, it gives you the longest side. Okay, so if we apply it to this problem like this, you can see that the problem now is very easy, okay, because you already have the values for a and b. All you have to do is plug in those values into your equation like that. That would give you this amount, and you end up with 2,000 is equal to c squared. Okay, problem, you have to reduce that c squared. So the way that you do it is that you take the square root, and remember that whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So if you take the square root of both sides of your equation, you end up with 44.7 miles, which is option C. Okay, so this problem is one of those drop-down question problems that involves two straight line, a graph with the two straight lines. Okay, so just a quick recap how we read graphs like this. You look at the title. So this is telling you that this is about beverages sold at a coffee shop. Your y values would be, that's the number of beverages sold. Your x-axis would be you know, which amount they sold in which month. Okay, so March, April, May, etc. And then you look at the legend, and this tells you that the blue line represents coffees that they sold, and the green line represents tea. So if we look at the graph again, they're asking us for February, so we can forget that side of the graph. And if you look at the green line, which they tell us is tea, they sold 3,000 teas in February. And then coffee, which was the blue line, is 2,250. Okay, so your ratio would be like this. Remember that whenever you have ratios, they always expect you to reduce it to the lowest expression. Okay, so if we find a common denominator between these two, I chose 250. It gave me 12 to 9 as a ratio, but this can be further divided. Okay, so here, if we look at the common denominator between these two numbers, it would be 3. So if I divide this by 3, then I end up with 4. The ratio of being 4 to 3. Okay, so that is the final answer. So all you had to do here is then get those drop-down menus down and then select the correct ratio. Okay, so question 23. For the expression below, find the value of x that would make the expression undefined. Okay, so this is a kind of a weird thing in math, so let's just quickly recap. What are undefined expressions? So basically, it's an expression that is not defined or which has no meaning. All right, and examples of this would be having a fraction that's divided by 0 or having a negative square root. Okay, so if we go back to our problem, what we would do to figure out the solution here is that we would take each of these answer options, which represent a value of x, and then plug it into the equation, into the square root, and see what number they give us, right? So if we put 10 into the equation like that, we end up with 5 times 10, which is 50, minus 4. That would give us 46, square root of 46. So this would be this would be wrong, okay, because we said that to have an undefined expression, we would either have to have like a fraction divided by 0 or a square root or a negative square root, and here you have a positive square root, so this is incorrect. So if we try option B, again, if you introduce 0 into the equation, you have 5 times 0, which is 0 minus 4, so you end up with a negative 4, square root of negative 4. Okay, so this would be the correct answer, because this expression, as we said, it's undefined, right? So once again, remember, undefined expressions are either a fraction divided by a 0 or a square root, a negative square root, which we have here. All right, so let's just finish the rest of them just out of completeness. So if we plugged 1 in, we end up with a square root of 1. You can see that it's a positive number, so that would be wrong. And then finally, if we introduce 3, we end up with a square root of 11, okay, which is also positive, meaning that it is a defined number. Okay, so the answer would be B, once again, because you end up with a negative square root, which is an undefined number. Okay, question 24. So it says, Lenny works in a restaurant. He's making a batch of ranch salad dressing for the salad bar. He uses 1.5 cups of mayo, 2 cups of sour cream, 7/8 cup of buttermilk. How many cups will the dressing fill? All right, so the first thing that you want to do, this is a kind of like a two-step problem, or three-step rather, is you want to change that mixed number into an improper fraction. All right, and let's quickly remind ourselves what a mixed number is. So a mixed number is made up of a whole number, which you can see there, and a fraction. All right, and fractions, remember, have two parts. They have the top number, which is the numerator, and the bottom number, which is the denominator. Okay, so in order to change a fraction from a mixed number to an improper fraction, I like to use something known as the MAD method, okay, because it's easy to remember. Okay, so MAD, the M stands for multiplication. Okay, so you would multiply that whole number, that 5, by your denominator. In this case, it's a 4, so 5 times 4 is equal to 20. And then the A stands for add. Okay, so here you would add the numerator, which in this case is 3, to the answer you just got before, okay, to the 20. So 20 plus 3 is equal to 23. And then finally, the D of MAD means denominator. And here what this means is that your new denominator is the same as the old denominator. Okay, in this case, it's 4. So, your mixed number, 5 3/4, if you write it as an improper fraction, it's 23 over 4. Okay, so you got the 23 from steps 1 and 2. And then, as we said, your denominator is 4 because it's the same as the mixed number denominator. Okay, so if we do that for this fraction, so once again, MAD method, multiplication, 1 times 2 is equal to 2. We're going to add that 2 to your numerator, which is 1. We end up with 3. So 3 is going to be your new numerator. And then the denominator is going to stay the same. It's going to be 2. So this is your new improper fraction. All right, so now you have all of your numbers in fraction form. Okay, so you have 3 2s, plus 2 over 1 plus 7 over 8. So the next step is, remember that when you add or subtract fractions, the numerator, which is the number at the bottom, has to be the same in order for you to either add or subtract all fractions. So what is the common denominator here? Well, it's 8, right? So in order for all of these numbers to have the same denominator, you have to multiply these numbers so that the denominator becomes 8. So if we look at 3 over 2, you would multiply that by 4, right? Because 2 times 4 is 8. And remember that whatever you do at the bottom, you have to do at the top. So you would do the same thing at the top, okay, with the numerator. So you would multiply 3 times 4. So that gives you this. Okay, we look at the second fraction, 2 over 1. In order to end up with a denominator of 8, you would have to also multiply by 8 here. So you would multiply this fraction by 8 over 8. That gives you 16 over 8. And then you have 7/8. All right, so now, according to the rules of fractions, you can go ahead and add this fraction. And remember, when you add or subtract fractions, the denominator, the number at the bottom, is always going to stay the same because it's common to all of them. And all you have to do is, in this case, add the top numbers. So 12 plus 16 plus 7. So that would give you 35 over 8. Okay, so it's 35 over 8. If you notice, though, in the answer options, they don't give you an improper fraction. They give you a mixed number. So the next step, the final step, would be to change this improper fraction to a mixed number. So if you just divided 35 by 8 on your calculator, it would give you 4.37, okay? But now we have to change this number, as I said, to a mixed number, okay? So that's going to be our whole number. Our remainder is going to be 33, and which is going to be our numerator, and our denominator is going to be 8. How did I get these numbers? Okay, so imagine you have this number that we said 35 over 8, or as you can see there in long division form on the right side. If you multiply, if you do this division, right, we have, if we put in 8 times 4, that's 32, right? So we have the remainder of 3. So now what these numbers represent, that 4 represents the whole number of your mixed number. The 3 is going to represent the numerator, and the 8 is going to represent the denominator. Okay, so your mixed number would be this, 4 and 3/8. Okay, and always good idea to check your work. So let's use that MAD method again to check our work. So if we multiply 4 times 8, that gives us 32. That's the M of MAD. Then the A, remember, was to add. So we add the numerator, which is 3. So 32 plus 3, that's 35. And the denominator remains the same. It's 8. So 4 and 3/8 is equal to 35/8. All right, so your correct answer would be answer C. Okay, so question 25 is a statistics problem. It says Luke and Sam are training for a 10K. Below is a table over their training schedule. Find the mode. All right, so in the statistics questions, you'll always find mean, median, mode, and range. Those are the common questions. So just as a recap, remember that mode simply means the most frequent value. So if we look back at the table and we look at the number of miles, you can see that the number of the most frequent number is 1.7 miles. Okay, so that's the number that comes up more frequently. So that would be your mode. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You don't have to do any operations. Just remember what mode means. Okay, so question 26 is a bar graph, and usually, usually you see bar graphs in a vertical bars, and this one is horizontal. So it's just important. I haven't seen that many questions with horizontal bar graphs, but it is important that you kind of have an idea of how to read them just in case. Okay, so this question says, a study is monitoring the fruit consumption of athletes. How many more oranges that female participants eat compared to apples? All right, so as always, follow your system, okay? So we're going to look at the title. So the bar graph is telling us that it's about fruit consumption in male and female athletes. Then our y-axis is looking at male athletes in the first bar, and then female athletes in the longer bar at the bottom. And then your x-axis is telling you the units of fruit, okay? So starting from 0 to 200. And then if you look at the legend there, it's telling you that the blue represents the number of pears, green apples, and the orange, and the pink represents oranges. All right. Okay, so if we go back to the question, it's talking to us about apples and oranges, and it's exclusively asking us about female athletes. So just to not confuse yourself, I'm going to confuse you. I'm going to remove that top bar. Okay, so we're looking exclusively at females. And they're telling us how many more oranges that they eat compared to apples. So if you look at your legend, oranges are there in pink, which is, if you look at the bar graph, there's 100 oranges, right, from 100 to 200. And all we have to do now is find the number of apples. So if you look at the number of apples, which are in green, they go from 60 to 100. Okay, so that's 40 apples, basically. Okay, and we said that we have 100 oranges because it's going from 100 to 200. Okay, so how many more oranges did they eat compared to apples? All you have to do is subtract 100 by 40 from 40, and that gives you 60. Okay, so 60 is your answer. Okay, so Rick is preparing for Christmas. He wants to wrap his house shaped like a square with string lights. What is the length of string lights he needs in feet? Each side of the house is 23 feet. All right, so here you have to remember two things. So first of all, what they're asking, is the perimeter, right? The distance around the house. So remember that perimeter is the distance around a figure. So this side plus this side plus this side plus this side. That would be the perimeter. And then the second thing that they're telling you is that his house is shaped like a square, and each side of the square is 23 feet. Okay, so now what you would do, second step, is to look at the formula sheet that's provided for you in the GED. And if you look at, the perimeter of a square, it's that. Okay, so all you have to do is plug that number that you have, that 23 feet, into the formula, and that gives you 92 feet. Okay, so essentially the perimeter of his house, meaning the distance around the whole house, is 92 feet, and that's how much length of string lights he's going to need. So option D. Okay, so question 28 is one of these fill in the blank questions. So remember that sometimes you'll get multiple choice questions, but sometimes you'll get these ones that are a little bit harder because you really don't have, you can't guess. Okay, so make sure that you introduce these sort of questions into your preparation also. Okay, so this question says, Lou is buying supplies for the office water cooler. He wants to find out how much water a cone-shaped cup can hold. The cup has a radius of 4 centimeters and a height of 10 centimeters. All right, so I always like to visualize problems. So this is the situation. We have this, this cup that's shaped like a cone, and we want to find out how much water actually fits into that cup, okay, or the volume that the cup can hold. All right, so if you look again at your formula sheet, there is this thing where it gives you the formulas to find the surface area or the volume. So that's the equation for the volume of a cone. All right, so now all you have to do is plug in the values from the question. Okay, so you have the volume is equal to 1/3 multiplied by pi multiplied by r squared h. Okay, so pi, which is that symbol there that looks like a table, that's 3.2. The radius, they've told us in the question, is 4, and the height is 10. Okay, so you would plug those numbers in like this, work your problem out, and that gives you this volume. Okay, so that's the volume of the cup, which you would introduce there in the white box. Okay, question 23. So this is a proportion problem. So it says, Rick is traveling to London for his holidays. The exchange rate is that $1 is equal to 0.72 pound sterling. After the holidays, he has 34 and 57 pounds left. How much is that in US dollars? Okay, so as I said, this is a proportion problem. So a proportion, let's remind ourselves, is just a relation between two values. Okay, so if we said, for example, 1/4 is equal to 25 cents, this is a proportion, as you can see there at the bottom. If I asked you how many cents are there in 7/4, all you would have to do is write equals 7/4 divided by x, okay, because that's the value that I have, 7/4, and I want to find out the number of cents. And then all you have to do to figure out this proportion is multiply across like this, and then solve for x. Okay, so x would be equal to 7 multiplied by 25. Okay, so if we go back to the problem, this is the proportion that we would set up, right? They've told us that $1 is equal to 0.72 pounds sterling. And they're telling us we have to find now how many dollars are contained in 34.57 pounds sterling. Okay, so you would set up your proportion like this. So the x value is the unknown, right? That's the number of US dollars that we want to find out. And then at the bottom, we have the amount of pounds. Okay, so all you do now, multiply across like this and like this. That gives you this expression. And now to find x, which is the number of US dollars, all you have to do is divide both sides by 0.72. Okay, so whatever you do on the left side, remember you have to do on the right side. And that gives you that x is equal to $48.01, okay, which is option A. All right, so question 30 asks you to solve x in this following inequality. All right, so just a quick reminder if you haven't been doing a lot of problems like this with inequalities. So reminder of the symbols. Whenever you have this symbol, it means greater than. If you have the symbol but a little line underneath, it says that means greater than or equal to. And then the opposite would be less than or equal to. Okay, so when you have these inequalities, you basically solve them like an algebra problem, like a regular algebra problem. Okay, so in this case, you would add 19 to both sides, okay, because we want to isolate the x. And that allows us to get rid of the 19 on the left side, and we end up with 5x is greater than 25. And then all you do now is isolate that x on the left side by dividing by 5. Okay, so divide this by 5 on both sides, and you end up with x is greater than 5. So your answer is option C, x is greater than 5. All right, so one key idea from this block is the MAD method. So remember that when you're changing from a mixed number to an improper fraction, this is a really kind of simple thing to remember, MAD. So MAD stands for M for multiply. So here we would multiply 4 times 5. And the A stands for add. So we would add the result of what we got in step 1 to the numerator, which is 3. And then our denominator stays the same. All right, so that's a very easy method to remember when you're changing from mixed numbers to improper fractions. Okay, question 31. Lucy owns a bakery. She makes $12 every time she sells a box of cupcakes, and her monthly expenses in flour, milk, eggs, and other ingredients is $7,300. What is the minimum number of cupcake boxes she needs to sell per month to make a profit? Okay, so this is a question similar to a question we've already covered before, so hopefully this is a review for you. So first of all, let's talk about, let's simplify this a little bit. Okay, so in order for Lucy to make a profit, we'd have to take what she sells, which I'm putting there in blue, and subtract her monthly expenses from that, okay? And in order to make a profit, she'd have to be above $0, okay? All of that would have to add up to more than $0. So we know that she sells 12 multiplied by x, that represents $12 per box of cupcakes, and the x represents the number of cupcake boxes that she sells. And then the 7,300 was the expenses. Okay, so all of this added together, if it is equal to 0, that would be breaking even. Okay, so she's not making a profit. So a profit would be anything above that number. Okay, so let's first, just for to make it simpler, let's calculate how much she would have to sell to break even. Okay, so we'll put that equation equal to 0, and then this is pretty easy now. We're going to add 7,300 on the left, do the same thing on the right, cancel that out. That gives you 12x is equal to 7,300. Okay, and in order to solve for x, we're going to isolate it, dividing both sides by 12 as such, and that gives you that x is equal to 608. So remember, this is breaking even, okay? So anything above this number would be a profit. So if we look at the answer options, the only number that is above that is option A, 609. All right, so question 32 involves a pie graph. So you have to be able to take some information from the pie graph to answer it. So it says Jesse's training for an Ironman. If he spends 25 hours weekly training, how many of those hours are devoted to running? All right, so first of all, let's remind ourselves what it looks like when you read a pie graph. So remember, the first thing you do is look at the title, because it's telling you what this pie graph is about. Another thing that you do is you look at the legend, because the legend is telling you what each of these slices in the pie represent, and allow you to answer the question, right? So in this case, it's telling you that during a 40-hour work week, how many hours does a person spend filing? Okay, so if you look at the pie and we look at the yellow it says filing is 7%. Okay, so what you want to do is take that 7% and make it into a decimal by dividing 7 by 100. That gives you 0.07. And then all you have to do to find out the number of hours that represents is multiply it by 40 hours, 40-hour weekday. Okay, so that's telling you that they spent 2.8 hours per week filing. Okay, so if we go back to our question, let's look at the title. It tells you that this is the 25-hour training schedule of this person. They're asking us about running, which is the green slice of the pie, and they run 40% of those 25 hours. So we're going to take those 40% and change it into decimal form like this, and then multiply it by the total number of hours, which was 25. That gives you 10 hours. Okay, so they spent 10 hours of their training time running. Okay, question 33. Okay, so question 33 is a system of equations question. Okay, so it says Jack owns a bakery. He sells a total of 59 donuts and muffins combined in the afternoon. He makes a total of $125. If the donuts cost $1.25 each and the muffins $2, how many muffins did he sell? Okay, so first of all, you want to set two equations. The first one has to do with the number of items. So they tell us in the question that he sells two products, donuts and muffins, and together he sells 59 of these items. Okay, so we have x plus y is equal to 59, and we'll just call x the donuts and y the muffins. Okay, and here what you want to do is you want to solve kind of for one of these values. Okay, so we'll solve for x like that. And we're going to forget this equation for a second. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and set our second equation, which is an equation that relates the cost of the items and the profit. So they're telling us in the question that he made a profit of $102.25. Okay, so if we put the cost of the individual items together in this equation, we have that the donuts were $1.25 multiplied by x, that would be the number of donuts sold, plus 2, which is the cost of each muffin, multiplied by y, which is the number of muffins sold. Okay? All right, so now this is a tricky part. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that first equation that we have there in blue, and you're going to introduce it into the second equation. So wherever you see an x, you're going to introduce that equation there on the top right, like this. All right, and now what you're going to do is you're going to use the distributive property, which means you're going to multiply 125 by 59 and 125 by minus y, and that gives you this number. All right, the next step is to simplify this kind of mess that you have here, and what you're going to do is you're going to simplify these two numbers. Why these two numbers specifically? Because they are similar terms, meaning that they both have a y attached to them. Okay, so you would say 2y minus 1.25y is equal to 0.75y. Okay, so now all you have to do is isolate the y value here. So you would subtract 73.75 from the left side, do the same thing on the right. That cancels out. That gives you this number. And then to isolate that y value, you're going to divide both sides by 0.75 as such, and that gives you that y is equal to 38. Okay, so next step is check your work. Okay, so in our initial equation, we said that this person had sold 59 items combined with donuts and muffins. Okay, and we said that the donuts were going to be x and the muffins were going to be y. We just found out that the value for y, or muffins, was 38. So if you plug that y value in there, like this, and then solve for x, you end up with x is equal to 21. Okay, so ultimately, the donuts that he sold were 21 donuts and 38 muffins. Okay, 21 plus 38 is equal to 59. Great. The next thing you want to do is check if this also works out in terms of the profit. So if we multiply that number of donuts that he sold, 21 donuts, by $1.25, which is the cost of each donut, that gives you $26.25. If we do the same thing for the muffins, and we multiply the 38 muffins that he sold by $2, which is the cost of each muffin. That gives you 76. Add these two together, that gives you $102.25, which is the total that he made. Okay, so your answer would be D. Richard is an electrician. He charges a base fee of $30 per visit and $17 per hour for his labor. The total cost, C of X, for home visit and X hours of labor is modeled by the function rule C of X is equal to 30 plus 17X. Find C of X. Okay, so this is a little bit of a mouthful, but what you have to remember is that whenever you have a problem that looks like this is an input-output system, meaning that if you input a number into the system, and by the input we're going to say X, it's going to give you as an output a value for Y. So let's say that they give you this equation there on the left, Y is equal to 3 minus 2X, and they give you that table. So what this is telling you is that if you introduce that value of X, which is 0, into that equation on the left, the answer that you should get is 3. Okay, and let's try it out. So if we take that equation and we introduce a 0 where the X is, you end up with this. So 3 minus 2 multiplied by 0 would give you 0, right? So 3 minus 0 is 3. Okay, so that's the value for Y. Okay, so all you have to do in your problem is take that value for X and introduce it into the equation there on the left as such. And that would give you that C of X is 115. Okay, so that is your correct answer, option C. Luke works part-time as a teacher, earning $20 per hour. He earns another 2/3 of his teaching hourly wage tutoring, and $7 less than his hourly teaching wage coaching Little League for an hour. If he makes $560 a week, which expression can be used to find out how many hours he taught in the classroom? Okay, so what you want to do here, this is what is known as a setup problem. So they don't actually want you to solve it. They want you to find the equation that you would use to solve this problem. Okay, so let's break it up a little bit. So let's first think about how, Luke makes his total income per week. He's basically doing 3 things, right? He's doing a teaching gig, he's also tutoring, and he's coaching. So, and all of that is going to give him his total wages for the week. Okay, so if we look at the question, they tell us that he earns $20 per hour of teaching. So if we put that in mathematical terms, it would be 20 multiplied by X. 20 represents the wage, so $20, and X represents the number of hours that he teaches. Plus, he also makes money tutoring, and they tell us that in the question that his tutoring wage is 2/3 of his teaching hourly wage. Okay, so it would be 2/3 multiplied by 20. And then finally, they tell us that the third gig that he has is coaching. Okay, and for coaching, they're going to pay him his teaching wage minus $7. Okay, so that's how you would set up the equation. And that would be option C. All right, so question 36 is a question that requires you to be able to gain some information from a histogram. So it says, Mike's office wants to cut down on coffee. They want to find the office baseline consumption first. What percent of the weekly coffee that they consume on Wednesday? All right, so as always, follow the system, right? First, we're going to read our title. What is this histogram telling us? It's telling us the total number of coffee cups, 158 in a week. Then the y-axis is telling us the number of coffee cups consumed. And then the x-axis is telling us how many of these cups were consumed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And the question is asking us about Wednesday. Okay, so we're going to look at that. So if we follow the bar graph to the top, it's 20 cups of coffee. So if we look at the coffee consumed on Wednesday, which is 20, and we divide by that by the total number of coffee consumed that week, we would say 20 divided by 158, that gives us this number. And then we multiply it by 100 because they're asking us for the percent. Okay, so it would be 12.6%, which is option A. All right, question 37. So this is a drop-down menu question, and it's giving you a line and asking you to find the slope of the line. All right, so when you click on these drop-down menus, it's kind of like a multiple choice question in a way, because there you have the options of the answers. Okay, so how do you find the slope? Well, the first thing that you have to do is you have the line, so you have to find out, use the coordinates that they give you to find out the slope. Okay, so if we look at this first coordinate there in a circle, remember that each coordinate is made up of an x value and of a y value. So if we look at the x value, it starts there at 0, and then it goes up to positive 4. So the coordinate, or the ordered pair for that coordinate, would be x of 1 is equal to 0, and y1 is equal to 4. So now we have to find this value. Okay, so once again, we're starting there at the 0 line for y, and the value for x is minus 5. Okay, so your values for this second point, the ordered pair, would be x2 is equal to minus 5, and that should say y2 is equal to 0, okay, not y1. All right, so keep those values in there for a second, and let's remind ourselves of what is the slope of a line. So the slope of a line is called the rise over the run. Okay, so the amount that a line moves vertically divided by the amount that it moves horizontally. And mathematically, it's calculated using these values. Okay, so which we already found, right? So if you remember, if we go back to these values, these ordered pairs that you just found, we said that x1 was equal to 0, y1 was equal to 4, and then x2 was equal to minus 5, and y2 was equal to 0. So if you plug these numbers into your equation like that, okay, so we would say 0 minus 4 in the top, and minus 5 minus 0 at the bottom, which gives us negative 4/5, which, minus 4 over minus 5 is a positive number. So that's your slope. All right, so your answer would be this one. All right, question 38. So we've done a few of these before. So it asks us to simplify this expression. So first thing that we want to do is we want to factor the equation on the top. Okay, so let's remind ourselves about factoring. So first of all, you're going to get the number, find out all the factors that would give you, multiplied together, would give you plus 6. Okay, so those are the factors of 6. And then you want to look at those numbers, and when added together, they should give you minus 5. Okay, so if we do it like that, in this example, the two numbers would be minus 2 and minus 3. Okay, so that would be the two numbers, the two factors. And then remember that you always check using the FOIL method, where the F stands for first. So you would multiply the first values there in black, so x times x, which is equal to x squared. The outer values, which would be x multiplied by minus 3, that gives you minus 3x, and the inner values, which are minus 2 multiplied by x, giving you minus 2. And finally, the L, which stands for last, would be minus 2 multiplied by minus 3. That gives you positive 6. All right, you add all these factors up, and it gives you your equation. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that for the top expression. So what are the factors of 20? So if you find out the numbers that multiply together give you 20, those are the factors. And then step 2, remember, is to take these numbers and then add them together to find the numbers that add up to minus 9, which would be minus 4 plus minus 5. Okay, so those are the factors that you want. So if we take our equation and we factor it out like that, now you can see how simple this is, right? All you have to do is cross these out. That gives you x minus 5. Correct answer is A. All right, question 39. So Sally wants to find the area of the structure below, where the height is half of the base, and x is equal to 5. Okay, so just before we start, a recap of a few things. Whenever you see signs like this is telling you that these sides are equal. Okay, so if they're telling us that this side is, the one at the bottom is 5, or x is equal to 5, then the top side will also equal to 5. And remember that when you look at this structure, the base is the bottom part and the height is that area in the middle. Okay, so first of all, we're going to find out the base, right? So they tell us in the diagram that that side is 4x. And they're telling us in the question that x is equal to 5. So all you have to do is introduce that value of 5 into this equation. So you would multiply 4 times 5. That gives you that the base is 20 centimeters. Okay, and as we said before, these symbols represent that they're equal, so the number at the bottom would be 20, and the number in the top would also be 20. Okay, next thing is to find the height, and they're telling us in the question that the height is half the base. So we just found out that the base was 20 centimeters, so all you have to do is divide by 2, and that gives you that the height is 10. Okay, so we've done kind of the first part, but the question is really asking us about the area of this structure, which is known as a parallelogram. So here is where you go to your formula sheet, which is provided for you in the test, and just find out this formula, which says that the area of a parallelogram is equal to the base multiplied by the height. You already have those numbers, which we calculated before, so all you have to do is multiply 20 times 10. That gives you 200 centimeters squared, which was option A. All right, question 40 is asking you to simplify this expression, and this expression, these problems are just a little bit messy, and you have to remember to be careful with the signs. Okay, so all you have to do here is use the distributive property. That means that you're going to multiply that negative sign times that number, and the next number. Okay, so if you do this, you end up with this expression at the bottom. And now all you have to do is clean it up by adding common terms. What do we mean by common terms? We mean numbers that have the same exponent. Okay, so we would start with 2x squared minus 3x squared. Okay, so that's a set of common terms. That gives you minus 2x squared. Then you add the next set of common terms. Okay, so all numbers that just have x without an exponent. So in this case, we would have x minus 2x gives you minus x. And then finally, you add the whole numbers. So minus 5 plus 10, which is equal to 5. So your expression is this one. And your correct answer would be C. All right, so just a recap from this block, remember that when you have a function or an f of x question, these are input-output systems. Okay, so let's say that they give you this expression and they ask you to find f of x, and they give you this little table. So what you would have to do here is put that x value into your equation like this, and that would give you the y value, okay, or the output, which is 9. All right, question 41. Ruby has to complete these 4 items this evening: take the trash out, call home, dinner, and gym, in no specific order. How many permutations to those activities are there? All right, so just a quick recap of what does permutation mean. So permutation tells you the number, what the possible outcomes or sequences of events are, right? So this person had 4 things that they had to do, so they could do it in this order, right? Go to the gym, call, dinner, then trash. Or they could call, then have dinner, then take the trash out, then do gym, or this final option. Okay, so how do you do these questions? So the way that I like to think about it is like this. Imagine you have your calendar there on the right, and you basically have these 4 slots of 1 hour, right? So each of these slots is going to be for each of these events. So let's say right now this person has 4 slots, so that's why we have a 4 there on the left. And we're just going to randomly say they're going to have dinner first. And now they have 3 events left on their calendar. So we multiply by 3. Then they could call home, all right, which leaves 2 slots on the calendar. So we multiply by 2. Then they could go to the gym, for example, and you can see that they have one slot left, so we would multiply by 1 there on the left. And that gives you 24. Okay, so 24 possible combinations of how to arrange these 4 items. All right, so that would be option B. Okay, so the next question is one of these drop-down menu questions involving a line graph. So it says the highest concentration of codeine in blood in the patient was at, and then when you hit that drop-down menu, it gives you various time options. Okay, so real quick, first of all, always follow your system. Look at the title. It's telling you that this is codeine concentration in blood. Your y-axis is telling you the concentration of that drug in nanograms per gram. There in the x-axis, you have the time, right? So starting at 9 and finishing at 5 p.m. And they're asking you for the highest concentration. So you would select that point right there, which is at 11 o'clock. All right, so this one is asking you to simplify this expression, and you can see that there at the top you have an absolute values at the top and in the bottom. So let's remind ourselves what this means. So the kind of formal definition of an absolute number is the distance from 0 that a number is on the number line, okay? The easiest way to remember, or the way that I think about absolute numbers, is that whenever you have a number like that is surrounded by vertical bars, whatever number is inside those vertical bars is going to be positive. Okay, so if you look at the first number, 3 surrounded by vertical bars is equal to 3. And in the bottom number, -3, if it's surrounded by those vertical bars, is also equal to 3. Okay, so if you remember that whenever you have these vertical lines surrounding numbers, the inside number is always going to be positive. All right, so if we go ahead and simplify, and we'll just do the top part first. So we have 10 plus, and then we have an absolute number. Within that kind of bracket, we have 5 minus -1. Okay, so that would end up being, if you have a negative -1, it would be positive. So we have 5 plus 1. If we add that together, that gives us 6. And remember that whatever number is inside those vertical bars is going to be positive. So we end up with 10 plus 6, which is a 16 on the top. All right, if we go ahead and do the same thing at the bottom, first of all, let's solve for what is in the parentheses on the right. So 4 minus 7 is -3. So we would end up with the absolute number of -3 minus -3. Okay, so remember when you have a negative and a negative, it turns into a positive. And remember, once again, that any number that is surrounded by those vertical bars, an absolute number, is positive. Okay, so that -3 on the left is actually +3 plus 3, which would give you 6. Okay, so this expression is 16 over 6. And then remember, you want to reduce it to a lower expression, so you find a common denominator, which would be 2, and reduce it to 8/3, which is option C. Jacob has been driving a taxi to make extra cash. He drove 8 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday, 5 hours on Wednesday. If he drives at a constant rate of 63 miles per hour, what distance did he travel in those days? Okay, so just a quick reminder, this is a really useful formula to remember, which is the formula for distance. So distance in miles per hour is equal to the rate times the time. Okay, so if we look at the problem, the first thing that we want to do is find out how many hours he drove those 3 days. Okay, so we just simply add 8 plus 2 plus 5. That gives us 15 hours that he drove. All right, so we have the time. And we also have the rate, okay, because they tell us in the question he drives a constant rate of 63 miles per hour. And they're asking us what is the distance he traveled. So very easy, you just multiply those two numbers together. That gives you 945 miles, option C. Okay, so this question is asking you to simplify this expression, and it looks really messy, but as long as you kind of keep on top of things, should be pretty straightforward. So remember, whenever you have an expression like this, you have to add common terms. All right, that means that you add all the numbers that have the same exponent together. So for example, in this case, we have 10x squared plus 5x squared. Those would be common terms. Okay, that gives us 15x squared. The next set of common terms would be numbers that have an x next to them. So 4x and 10x. Okay, so we have 4x plus negative 10x, which would give you negative 6x. And then finally, the last common terms are minus 7 plus 3, which would give you minus 4. All right, and those three numbers together make up your new expression, which is option A. All right, so question 46 is a slope problem. So they're giving you a slope equation in the form of 21x minus 3y is equal to 30, and they're asking you to find the slope. So let's quickly recap slope equations. So usually they give you slope equations in two formats, either the standard form like this, which is what we have in this question, or the y-intercept form. Okay, and remember that when they give you the y-intercept form in this expression, the letter m represents the slope. Okay, so that's what we want to find out. We want to find out what m is. So once again, they give us this equation, which is in standard form, and what we want to do is change it into y-intercept form to find the value for m, which represents the slope. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to isolate y there on the left side by getting rid of that 21x, by adding negative 21x to the left side, doing the same thing on the right side, so that these two numbers cancel out. That leaves us with this expression. And now all you have to do is divide both sides by negative 3 so that you can isolate x. And I'm just going to rewrite the expression like this. So we divide both sides by minus 3. That gives us y is equal to 7x minus 10. And the reason I rearranged the terms before is because we wanted to have our equation in this format. Okay, so you have the y is equal to mx plus b. Okay, so that was our answer, and remember that we said that m represents the slope. Okay, so the correct answer is 7, option C. All right, question 47 is a geometry problem. So it's telling you that Bob just bought a 14-inch pizza, and it's asking you to find the circumference of the pizza. Okay, so these are sort of straightforward questions if you remember that in the exam you have a formula sheet. Okay, so if you look at the formula sheet, there's a equation there to find the circumference of a circle. All right, so it's circumference is equal to pi multiplied by diameter. Okay, so pi is that symbol that looks like a table, and remember that it is worth 3.14. Okay, so you would multiply 3.14, or the value of pi, by 14 inches, and that gives you the circumference of the pizza. Option B. All right, question 48. So it says, Jim buys a $600 jacket with a 25% discount. At the checkout, he notices the jacket has a small imperfection, and the store manager gives him a 17% discount on the discounted item. How much did he pay for the jacket? Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the problem the wrong way. So a lot of times folks will look at this problem and they'll say, okay, so he got a 25% discount and a 17% discount. So let me add those together. That's 42% discount. And let me figure out how much he paid for the jacket based on that, right? So they would multiply that number to find out the discount, and then find the discounted, how much he paid for the jacket. Okay, this is wrong. Okay, it's incorrect, because the question is he basically paid for the jacket already with the 25% discount, and then they gave an additional discount on the already discounted item. Okay, so basically you would have to do it like this. You first of all find out the first discount. Okay, so they're telling us it's 25%. If we change that into decimals, it's 0.25. So you would multiply that by 600, which is the price of the jacket. Okay, so he got a 150% discount. Excuse me, $150 discount. All right, so if we subtract that amount from the $600, that gives us that the price now, after that first discount, is $450. Okay, so now the manager gives him an additional 17% discount on that already discounted item. Okay, so 17% is 0.17 in decimal form. And here we're going to multiply that number by $450, which is which was the cost of the jacket after the first discount. Okay, so that gives us $76.50. And all you have to do is subtract from that amount, from $450, and that gives you this amount, $373.50. Okay, which is option C. All right, question 43 is a slope problem. So we've already done one of these, so hopefully you remember how to do it. So this is a drop-down menu question, so you hit the tab and it gives you the options. So what you want to do here is, first of all, find the coordinates, or the y, x, y, y, y1, excuse me, values for each point. Okay, so we would find the coordinates here. So it's the x value is 2, and then the y value is 4. Okay, so that is our first coordinate, or first set of ordered pairs, if you like. All right, we're going to do the same thing for the second point. So if we go down there, you can see that the x value is -2 because that's where we started, and then -4 where the arrow is pointing right now. All right, so these are the two set of ordered pairs that we have. And once again, remember that the slope of a line was also known as the rise over the run, and it can be expressed mathematically like this. So all you have to do now is take those numbers that you just found out and introduce them into this formula. So that gives us -4, -4, -2, -2, which is -8 divided by -4, which is +2. Okay, so the slope is 2. All right, question 50, again, another line graph, but in this case you have two lines. So it's asking you during what month was the revenue of both gyms the same? And again, it's in the drop-down menu, it gives you some options for answers. So remember, you're going to look first at the title, which tells you what the graph is about. The y-axis is telling you that that's revenue. The x-axis is telling you the amount earned each of the months. And then there on the legend in the top right, it's telling you that the pink line is the gym in Brooklyn. The purple line represents the gym in Queens. And it's telling you when these two gyms are getting the same revenue, which you can see there is in April. Okay, that's when the two lines intersect, which means that they're both making the same amount of money. Okay. All right, so one key idea from this section was the idea of absolute number. So whenever you have a number that is surrounded by these vertical bars, remember that it's going to be a positive number. Okay, so if you have a -7 surrounded by these vertical bars, it's an absolute number, so the answer is +7. All right, moving on to question 51. So this is a question which has a histogram. So it says Ed is a meteorologist. He is measuring the amount of snow that fell in Chicago during the month of February. How much more snow fell in week 2 compared to week 3? Okay, so as always, remember, we're always going to follow our system, right? Look at the title, y-axis, x-axis. Then follow the column that you need to the top and then to the left. All right, so in this case, they're telling us it's a histogram about snow in Chicago in February. If you look at the y-axis, it's telling you inches of snow. X-axis is telling you how many inches of snow in week 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and in the question, they're talking to us about week 2 and week 4. So if we just go ahead and subtract the amount of snow in week 2 from and 4, you end up with a difference of 15. Okay, so 15 inches more of snow fell in week 2 compared to week 4. All right, so Sarah is an architecture student. She wants to make a small scale model of the house she wants to design. 1 inch in the model represents 2.5 feet in real life. If she plans to make a house that is 18 feet tall, how tall does her model need to be in inches? Okay, so let's first of all visualize the problem. So basically we have that house there on the left. On the right, we know it's 18 feet tall, and we want to find out what the equivalent proportion would be in that model on the left. Okay, so just once again, remember a proportion is just simply a relation between two values. So if we thought about a quarter is equal to 25 cents, so the relationship or the proportion would be written as 1/4 divided by 25 cents. And then if you wanted to know, for example, how many cents there were in 7 quarters, you would write a proportion like this and then solve for x. And the way that you do that is just multiplying across like that and finding the x value. Okay, so in this problem, they're telling us that 1 inch of the model is 2.5 feet in real life. Okay, so the proportion would be set up as you see there on the left. And then they're asking us how tall does the model need to be in inches if the real house is 15 feet tall. All right, so you would set up your proportion like that because we know that the house is 18 feet in real life, and then what we want to find is x, how tall that model would be. So once again, as in the example, we multiply across like that and solve for x. So the way that you isolate x in that equation is just divide by 2.5 on both sides, and that gives you 7.2 inches, which is option C. All right, so this question is a statistics and probability question. So it says Barbara has the opportunity to win a car if she rolls a 5 in a die and she gets an odd number in a spinner. What is her probability of winning the car? Okay, so first of all, let's quickly recap what the probability ratio is. Okay, so in order to find a probability, you basically have to divide the number of favorable outcomes, what you want to obtain, divided by the possible outcomes. Okay, so if I asked you what's the probability of getting a heads when you flip a coin, the possible outcomes are 2, and the favorable outcome would be 1/2, right? There is only one opportunity to get heads or tails when you throw a coin. Okay, so in this case, the possible outcomes when she rolls the die would be 6, okay, because if you look at the die, it has 6 sides. And then they're telling us if she rolls a 5. Well, she only has one opportunity to roll a 5, right? So the probability ratio would be 1/6. And then in the second part, she also has to get an odd number when she uses the spinner. So if we look at the spinner, you can see that there are 8 numbers, and there's 4 of them that are odd. Okay, so 4 divided by 8 is equal to 1/2. And now step 3 is to multiply both of these probabilities to find the combined probability. All right, so you multiply across, so 1 times 1 on the top and 6 times 2 in the bottom. That gives you 1/12. Okay, so 1/12 is the probability of winning the car. All right, so this question is another question with bar graphs. In this case, we have 2 sets of data. So it says Jules and Olivia are training for a marathon. How much more did Olivia run this month compared to Jules? All right, so once again, and I know I'm trying to drill this into your head, but just follow the system. Look at the title. This is about marathon running. The y-axis is telling you how many miles they ran. The x-axis is telling you how much they ran in week 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the legend there is telling you how much Olivia ran in blue and how much Jules ran in green. Okay, so all you have to do is just add up the number of miles that each of them clocked in, like that. You can see that Olivia had a total of 24 in 4 weeks, and Jules ran a total of 22 miles. Okay, so the difference is 2 miles. Answer A. All right, so question 55 is asking you to simplify this expression, okay? And this you have to be really careful with the signs and also with the exponents. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you're going to have to distribute that number, meaning that you have to multiply each of these numbers by what's in the bracket on the right side. Okay, so you're going to multiply the 3x squared multiplied by everything that's on the bracket on the right side, minus 5x also multiplied by everything that's in the bracket there on the right. Okay, so you would multiply as you see there below. All right, and here you're also going to use the distributive property, okay, meaning that you're going to multiply that 3x squared plus that first by that first number. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9, and x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. Then you multiply by minus 10, that would give you minus 30x raised to the 3rd power. And you multiply by minus 2, okay, that gives you 6x squared. All right, so you're all set on the left side. And then you're going to do the same thing with this expression in pink. So minus 5x multiplied by 3x squared would give you 15x to the 3rd power, plus 50x squared plus 10x. Okay? All right. So that is step 2. And now you have to clean up this mess, okay? And you do that by adding common terms. So remember, once again, common terms means that you add numbers that have the same sort of exponents, okay? So you're going to add all the numbers that have x to the power of 3 together, all the numbers that have x squared together, all the numbers that have x together. Okay, so 9x to the 4th is the only term with that exponent, so we're done there. Next one, we're going to look at the numbers that are raised to the 3rd power, so that would be minus 30x to the 3rd minus 15x to the 3rd, gives you 45. Do the same thing for numbers raised to the 2nd power, and then numbers just with an x value, okay? And essentially, you're now going to take all those answers and put them together in this expression. All right, so your correct answer is option D. All right, question 56. So before going camping, JJ has to buy a tent pole to replace the one he lost on his last outing. If the area of the front of the tent is 36 square feet and the base of the tent is 9 feet, how tall must the pole be? All right, I always like to visualize problems. It makes things easier. So there we have the area on the left, and that's the tent on the right. So when we know that the base is 9 feet across, and then what we want to find out is how tall that pole that he has to replace has to be. Okay, so here is where you go to your formula sheet on the exam page, and it tells you that in order to find the area of a triangle, you have to use this formula. Okay, we already know the area, which is 36, but we want to find out the height, which is letter H. Okay, so you're going to plug in those numbers that you already have. So the area was 36, we said. The base was 9, and we're trying to find H. Okay, so we're going to solve for H. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by 2 on the right side. Remember, whatever you do on one side, you have to repeat on the other. The reason we're doing this is because if we multiply by 2, we can get rid of that other 2 there on the bottom. And that leaves us with 72 is equal to 9h. And now what you have to do to isolate that h is divide both sides by 9. That gives you that the height of the pole is 8 feet. Okay, question 57 is another geometry question. So it says, Jan just purchased a bag. She wants to find out the area of the handbag with the dimensions below. What is the area of the bag? Okay, so this shape that you're looking at that looks like a weird handbag is a trapezoid. Okay, so you would go to your formula sheet again to find the area of a trapezoid, and all you have to do is plug in the values that you can see there in the image. Okay, so B1 represents base 1 and B2 is base 2. So you basically can choose, any of, call each of them whatever you want. So 18 plus 23. Then the height is 6 inches, as you can see there, and then you're just going to solve that equation. That gives you that the area is 123. Option C. All right, 58. So more geometry, this time looking at circles. So it says Luke just bought a round bathtub with the dimensions below. What is the area of the bathtub? Okay, so anytime they ask you for areas or anything like that, remember, go to your formula sheet. There is a section dedicated to areas of different shapes. So if you look at the area of a circle, it is pi multiplied by the radius square. Okay, so remember that that little symbol that looks like a table is called pi, and it is worth 3.14. Okay? And now, in order to find the radius, because we don't have the radius, in the question they give us the diameter, okay, which is the distance across in a circle. And remember that the radius is basically half of the diameter, okay? So we would take those 44 inches from the image and divide by 2. That gives us a radius of 22. Okay, and now that we have both numbers that we need for our formula, all we have to do is plug them in and then get the square of 22, which is 484, and multiply those two numbers together gives us this number. Option C. All right, so Alicia has a 3-year-old. She wants to have a fence built around her pool to keep the child safe. Given the dimensions below, what is the length of fence in feet needed? Okay, so this question is a kind of a perimeter question, all right? So remember that the perimeter is the distance around the figure. So let's imagine this is the pool, right? So we want to put fence all across there, down here, and down here, all right? And we want to know how much fence we have to put up. So once again, here, if you go to your formula sheet, you can see that there is a section devoted to perimeter of different shapes. And what we have is a rectangle. Okay, so that's the rectangle, and that's the formula there. So what you're going to do is just plug those numbers there. So the length is 50, and the width is 25. And if you solve that, it gives you 150 feet. Okay, so that's the amount of fence that she's going to need. All right, and we're going to finish the last question in this section with a slope problem. Okay, so it tells you, given m is equal to 5 and negative 4, 0, find the y-intercept. Okay, so here they're giving you an ordered pair, which is those two numbers in the parentheses, and then they're giving you the value of y and asking you to find the y-intercept. Okay, so this is a formula that looks pretty messy. It's called the point-slope form of the equation of a line. And what we're going to do, just a recap, so what this means, the m, as we said, is the slope. These two numbers that are appearing in pink, these are the ordered pairs that they're giving you, okay? So it's one x value, and one y value, okay? So all you have to do is plug those numbers into the equation. All right, so if we have the equation there again, and they're telling us the value for y1 is 0, we'll just plug that in. And all you have to do now is kind of clean up the equation. So if we look at the bracket, we have x minus 4. So that would translate into x plus 4, like that. And the next thing you want to do is you want to use the distributive property, meaning that you're going to multiply that 5 by x, and you're also going to multiply it by 4. So that gives you this. And then all you have to do is solve for y. Okay, so on the left side, we have y minus 0. You would add 0, even though you don't really have to, but there you go. Do the same thing on the right side, and that gives you y is equal to 5x plus 20. So the y-intercept is this number, okay? So it's the point at which the line is crossing the y axis, okay? That's the y-intercept. All right. Okay, so question 61 is one that involves square roots. And sometimes remember that in the GED, they will ask you questions where you can't use your calculator. Okay, so you do have to have kind of a working knowledge of how to solve these questions. All right, so first of all, let's just recap. So how do you find the square root if they give you something like this? So what you have to remember that, or what you have to ask yourself when you see a square root is what number multiplied by itself would give you that number under the square root, right? So in the case of 25, we know that 5 times 5 is equal to 25, so the square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so if we go back to our problem, now you see that it's pretty straightforward, right? So if we look at the top, what number multiplied by itself would give you 49? It would be 7, right? Because 7 times 7 is 49. And then we already did the square root of 25, which we said was 5. So the answer to the square root would be 7 over 5, which is option B. All right, so Amanda just bought a new apartment. Her kitchen plan is shown below. The carpenter needs to find the missing angle of the kitchen in order to build a pantry. Find the missing angle. Okay, so you essentially need to find angle B. All right, but before we get to that, so this is kind of like a strange looking figure, but remember, whenever you have this is known as a four-sided plane figure, what you have to remember is that all of the angles of these sort of figures have to add up to 360 degrees, okay? And that's important because when you go to add those four angles, that's what it has to give you. Second thing, remember that whenever you see a little box like that, it's telling you that that angle is 90 degrees. Okay, so we said that all of these angles in a four-sided plane figure have to equal to 360. Okay, so your formula would be A plus B plus C plus D is equal to 360. Second thing we said is that when you have those little boxes, that means that those angles are worth 90 degrees. All right, so if you plug those numbers into your equation like that, and then you just clean things up a little bit there on the left, you would end up with B plus 290 is equal to 360. All right, and now it's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is solve for x. So in order to isolate the x on the left side, we're going to subtract as always. Do the same thing on the right side. That gives you B is equal to 70, okay, which is option A. Okay, so sometimes in the GED, aside from multiple choice questions or drop-down menu questions, you will have questions where they just ask you to put your answer in a box. Okay, so these are hard because you don't have any, you can't guess, basically. Okay, so it says, the perimeter of a plot of land shaped like a right triangle is 2,400 feet. The longest side is 150 less than twice the shortest side. The middle side is 100 feet less than the longest side. Find the length of the middle side of the plot. Okay, so this is a bit of a tongue twister, but essentially what they're telling us, they're asking us is the perimeter. Okay, so remember perimeter is kind of the distance around a figure or a shape. Okay, so in this case, you would add that side plus that side plus that side. Okay, that's the perimeter. In the case of this triangle, it's adding the short side, the middle side, and the long side. And if you forget that, then remember, if you head over to your formula sheet, there's the formula, okay? So S side 1 plus side 2 plus side 3. Okay, so here, the whole thing about this question, it's that it's a bit of a tongue twister, right? Because the way that they write it, okay? So you have to kind of dissect it a little bit. So they're telling us that the longest side, they're giving us a value for the longest side and a value for the middle side. And they don't tell us anything about the short side. Okay, so the short side we're going to call x. And then they tell us that the longest side is twice the shortest side. Okay, so if that would be 2 times x, because we said x was the short side. And then minus 150. Okay, so that's the long side. And then the middle side is 100 feet less than the longest side. Okay, so the longest side in parentheses minus 100 feet. And now all you have to do is use these values okay, and plug them into that equation that says perimeter is equal to short side plus middle side plus long side. Okay, like that. And everything is going to equal to 2,400 because they're telling us in the question that that's the perimeter of the plot. All right, so what you want to do is just clean things up a little bit. So you're going to add all the x terms together. So x plus 2x plus 2x, that would give you 5x. And then minus 50, minus 100, minus 150, which gives you minus 400. And then isolate the x on the left side by adding 400. Do the same thing on the right side. That gives you this number. And then in order to isolate x, divide both sides by 5. Okay, and that gives you that x is equal to 560. But you haven't finished yet because the question is asking you for the length of the middle side. Okay, you just found the short side. Okay, you found x. So what you want to do is you want to take that value for x that we just found and just plug it into the equation like that, and then solve this equation out. That would give you 870. Okay, so that's the middle side of the plot, 870. All right, so Mark has 4,312 in a savings account that earns 7% interest rate annually, which is not compounded. How much interest will he earn if he keeps his money rounded to the nearest hundredth in the account 5 months? Okay, so this is a simple interest question. Excuse me. And if you go to the formula sheet, you have the formula there. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward, but we just have to make sure that we get the certain numbers correct. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we're going to take that rate and change it into a decimal. So the rate is 7% annually. If we change it into decimals, that's 0.07 per year. The second thing is the time, right? So it's actually 5 months over 12 months, which gives you 0.4 years, okay? Because everything has to be in years, all right? So the rate, the time has to be in the same unit of time, which is years. So this is the tricky part. And then all you have to do is plug those numbers in to this equation that we saw before. So the principal was 4,312. Multiplied by that rate in decimals, multiplied by the time, which is 5 months over 12 months, or 0.416 years, and that gives you that amount, okay, which is option C. All right, so question 65 is a geometry question. It says the distance around a carousel is 24.57 yards. What is the radius? All right, so once again, head over to your formula sheet, and it gives you the circumference of a circle, which is kind of like the perimeter, right? The distance around the circle. And it's telling you that's the formula, so pi multiplied by the diameter. And they're giving us the circumference in the question, so we are just going to plug that number in. And the value for that symbol, pi, is 3.14. And multiplied by the diameter. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide both sides by 3.14 to isolate the diameter. But the question is asking us for the radius. And remember that the radius is half of the diameter. So all we have to do is divide that value for the diameter by 2. That would give us the radius, which is 3.91. Option C. Okay, so now question 66. All right, so this question looks pretty scary. So it's telling you to solve this equation for x. And what you want to remember here is that whenever you have an expression like that that is raised to the second power, this is telling you that it's a quadratic equation. And these answer options are in the form of the quadratic formula. So if you head over to your formula sheet, you'll find the quadratic formula there. And actually, I know it looks very scary, it looks absolutely horrible, but it's actually very, very simple. I'll show you in a second. Okay, so right now, this equation is in this form. It's in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, okay? So a, what's the value of a in this equation? It's 3, right? Because it's telling us 3x squared. What's the value of b? 10, and the value of c? -2. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to plug these numbers into this formula. And that's going to give us this in that quadratic formula. Okay, so I know it looks really ugly, but again, very simple. So if you look at the top of the formula, it says x is equal to -b. So if you look at the left side, we said that b was equal to 10. So we're going to have x minus 10. Then it says plus minus the square root of b squared. Okay, so once again, the value for b is 10, as you can see there on the left, minus 4ac. Okay, so we have -4 multiplied by a, which is the value is 3, as you can see there, and multiplied by c, which is -2. All right, so that's the top. And then the bottom is divided by 2a, and once again, we multiply 2 by 3, because 3 was the value for a. All right, and if you clean this up like this, you end up with a square root of 100 plus 24 in the top, like this, and that's it. That's the answer. Okay, so it looks really ugly. It's kind of very scary, but if you take the time and you do it slowly, you can see that it's easy to figure out. Okay, question 67. So it says, a baseball field is shaped like the diamond shown below. If a player throws a ball from second base to the catcher in home plate, how far does the ball travel? Okay, so basically that's what they want to see. They want to know that distance. And what you have to realize is that this diamond is actually 2 right-angled triangles, okay? And that's important because they want you to use this formula, the Pythagorean theorem, all right, which says that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So if we go back to our figure, now you can see this is pretty straightforward, right? So we have the value for a and for b, which is 80 feet in both cases, and they want us to find the value for c. So if we plug those numbers into the equation as such, we end up with the square root of 12,800. Okay, so how do we get rid of that, of the c squared there on the left? You would take the square root. Oops, my battery is dying, excuse me. And that gives you 113.13, okay, which is that distance there. And that is option A. Okay, question 68. So this is a combined figures question. So it's telling you that Maria works as a helicopter pilot. She needs to land in the helipad with the dimensions below. What is the total area of the pad? Okay, so that's the helipad. That's her in the helicopter. She needs to land there, and we want to find the total area. Okay, so what this is a combined figure, and it means that underneath this mess, there's several figures. So one of them is a square right there, okay? So we have one square, and we have 4 half circles or 2 full circles, if you like. So the first thing that you're going to do in order to find the total area of the pad is find the area of that square there in white. Okay, so we have that the square, they all have the same sides, right? So 20 feet there, 20 feet there, 20 feet there, and there. So the area is going to be 20 squared, which is 400 for the square. And then you can either find the area of 2 full circles or 4 half circles. So for some reason, I decided to do it with half circles by dividing this formula by 2. But you don't have to. I just decided to complicate my life. So all you do here is you would introduce that number there, that 5, into the formula, and you end up with this area for a half circle. So we multiplied by 4 because there's 4 half circles. That gives you 157. And then you would add that number to the 400 that you found before for the square, and that gives you option D. Okay, question 69. So one of the things you have to remember with the GED is that it's not only multiple choice questions, fill in the blank. Sometimes you actually have to interact with the question, right? So you have to like plot a point on a graph or things like that. So this is one of those questions. So it's telling you Luke wants to determine the radius of his maple trees. He plots data for year 2 and 10. Click on the grid to plot these points. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is, it's telling us in the question that he wants to determine the radius. But if you look at the table, it's giving you the diameter. All right, so the first step is to actually change that number from diameter to radius. Remember that the radius is simply half of the diameter. So for year 2, they're telling us that the diameter is 8. So we would divide that by 2. That gives us a radius of 4. And then for the year 10, the diameter is 14. So we would divide by 2. That gives us radius of 7. Okay, so now all you have to do is plot those points in the graph. And this is where it gets a little bit, you have to read it carefully. So it says X is the number of years and Y is the radius. Okay, so the number of that first point for year 2, the X value would be 2, and the Y value, the radius, would be 4. Okay, so that's your first point. And then for year 10, they're telling us the X value is the number of years, so 10 is the X value, and then the radius would be 7. So that's where you would plot your second point. Okay, so those are your coordinate pairs. Okay, question 70. So a company makes wax candles in the shape of a cylinder. Each candle has a radius of 5 inches and a height of 4 inches. If the company used 84,780 ounces of wax this week, how many candles did they make? Okay, you can see that it's a drop-down menu question. So essentially what you have to do is, first of all, find the volume for each candle, okay? And that's the formula for a cylinder that you're seeing there on screen. So they're telling us that the radius of these candles is 5 inches and the height is 4 inches. So if you plug those numbers in, you end up with that volume, 314. And now we have to find out how many candles they made. So we're going to take the total amount of wax used this week, which was 84,000, that super long number, and we're going to divide that amount of wax by how much wax it takes to make one candle, which is the number we just found out, right? 314. So if you divide that gives you 270, okay, which you would just mark like that. All right, so the next question says, the juice carton holds 1,350 centimeters cubic centimeters. The width is 5 centimeters, the length 6 centimeters. Find the height of the carton. Okay, so here what you have to do is go to the to your formula sheet, and it's kind of a little bit, you have to kind of look around a little bit, because what they're giving you is 3 pieces of data, right? They're giving you the volume, they're giving you the length and the width, and what you want to find is the height. So you would use this formula for finding the volume of a rectangular prism. Okay, so you would use this formula, and then all you have to do is plug in those numbers in the question, right? So they're telling us that's the volume there on the left. The width we said was 5, the height was 6, the length was 6, and then they're asking you for the height. So all you have to do there on the right, multiply the 5 times the 6, that gives you 30, and then we want to isolate the height on the right side by dividing both sides by 30. All right, like this. That would give you that the height is 45 centimeters. All right, you would introduce that in that white box. All right, so another geometry question. So they're telling you that air is leaking out from a spherical shaped advertising balloon at a rate of 20 cubic feet per minute. If the radius of the ball or the balloon is 5 feet, how many whole minutes would it take for the balloon to fully empty? All right, so this question is kind of looks a little bit intimidating, but it's a straightforward if you know what you're looking for. Okay, so here what you would do is you would find out first how much air is contained inside that sphere or that balloon. Okay, so the volume, how much volume does it hold? So you would use this formula in your formula sheet. Okay, and here all you have to do is introduce the value for the radius, which they tell us in the question is 5 feet. So if you put it in there like that, and you multiply by pi, which remember is 3.14, you end up with that volume. Okay, so that's the amount of air that is contained inside that spherical shaped advertising balloon. All right, so now we have to find out how long it takes to empty that balloon. All right, so what we would do is we would take that volume, which we just found, and divide it by the rate at which the air is escaping from the balloon, okay, which in the question they tell us is 20 cubic feet. So you divide those two numbers by each other, and that would give you the time, okay? So 26.166 minutes. There I rounded it up, but the correct answer would be the previous one, 26.166. Okay, question 73. So question 73 is looking at bar graphs, and you can see that there's 3 different color graphs. But the way that you read these graphs are the same as you've been doing in previous examples, okay? So it says, Joe's Sport just opened retail shops in New York. The sales for the first month are shown below. What was the ratio of accessories sold in the Brooklyn shop to the Harlem shop? All right, so once again, let's remind ourselves, I know it's getting boring, but really want to drill it into your head. Whenever you read a bar graph, first we're going to look at the title, then the y-axis, then the x-axis, and then we're going to look at the legend. All right, so here we look at the title. It tells us it's sales at Joe's Sports, and then the y-axis tells us how many items they've sold. The x-axis is telling us the accessories sold, the shoes sold, and the clothes sold. And then in the legend, you can see that we have the different shops in New York, one in Harlem, one in Queens, and one in Brooklyn. Okay, so the question asks us specifically about accessories. Okay, so we're going to hide that part of the graph. And it's asking for the shops in Brooklyn and Harlem. So Brooklyn is the yellow bar graph. So you can see that there were 60 items sold in Brooklyn compared to the blue column, which is Harlem, which was 40 items. Okay, so the ratio is 60 to 40. Remember, whenever you have a ratio, though, that you always have to reduce it to the minimum expression. So you would find a common denominator between these two numbers and reduce it. So divide by 20 in this case, and it would give you a ratio of 3 to 2, which is option C. All right, question 74. So Jamal is trying to quit smoking. He's been monitoring his cigarette consumption. When was he least successful? Okay, so this is fairly straightforward. All you have to do here, you have a tally, right, of cigarettes that he's smoked each day. So all you do is kind of translate that tally into numbers. So we know that he smoked 6 cigarettes on Monday. He smoked 3 on Tuesday, 1 on Wednesday, etc. So when was he least successful? Well, as you can see from the table, he was least successful on Monday, okay, because he smoked 6 cigarettes versus Sunday when he didn't smoke any cigarettes. Okay, so the correct answer would be Monday, option A. Question 75. So Mark recently changed his career to spend more time with his family. His salary went from $1,780 to $1,050. What was the percent change in his salary? All right, so anytime you have to calculate percent change, this is the formula that you need to use. Okay, so you would subtract the new salary minus the original salary divided by the original salary, and then multiply by 100 because they're asking us for a percent. Okay, so if we apply this to this problem, they told us that his new salary is $1,050. We would subtract that from the original salary, which was $1,780, divide that by the original salary, once again, and then multiply by 100. So that gives us negative 0.41 times 100. So the percent change would be negative 41%. So why is it a negative number? Well, because his salary went down. Okay, so he's lost 41% of his income when he changed his job. Okay, so the percent change is going to be negative because he's lost, as we said, 41% of his income. All right. Okay, so question 76. Which value for x makes the inequality true? So the inequality is x is more than 450, or x is greater than 450. Okay, so what you have to do here, it's kind of a little bit tedious, but all you have to do is go through every single option until you hit the right answer, okay? So basically, we'd start with A, which says 2 squared. So remember that when you have a number that is squared, you're basically going to multiply that base number by itself twice. So in this case, 2 squared is 2 times 2, or x equals 4. Okay, so is 4 greater than 500? No, it is not. Okay, option B, it says 5 raised to the power of 0, and that is 1. So x is equal to 1. So once again, 1 is not greater than 500. That is incorrect. Why is the answer 1? Well, this is just basically a rule you have to remember. Whenever you have an exponent, a 0 exponent, right, where you have the base raised to the 0, whether that's 1 raised to the 0, that will be 1, or 500 raised to the 0, that will also be 1. Okay, so that's a rule that you just have to remember. Okay, option C, 2 raised to the 9th power. Okay, so here we're going to multiply that base number, 2, by itself 9 times as such, and that gives us 512, okay, which is greater than 500. Therefore, that is the correct answer. And just out of completeness, let's do option D. So 6 raised to the 3rd power. We're going to multiply that base number 6 by itself 3 times. That gives us 216, which is also not greater than 500. That's also incorrect. Okay, so our correct answer is option C. All right, so question 77. Sally's meal before tax and tip was $17.34. She paid 7% tax and then added a 20% tip to the total. How much did she pay for her meal? Okay, so the first thing is, basically, we're going to have to find out 2 things. First of all, we're going to have to find out the tax on the meal, okay? And the second thing is we're going to have to find out, on top of that, how much is the 20% tip. So we're going to take that 7%, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to change it to a decimal format. So 7% is 0.07. And then you're going to use this formula that tells you that, when you multiply the total, which in this case was $17.34, times the percent or the rate, 0.07, that gives you the part, or specifically the tax for the meal. Okay, so that was $1.21. So now we add that $1.21, which was the tax on the meal, to the original price of the meal, and that gives us what the price of the meal was. Okay, so $18.55. Okay, so on top of those $18.55, the next thing that we want to do is we want to calculate the 20% tip on that of that total. Okay, so we're going to use the same formula that we used before, except this time, instead of multiplying by 0.07, we're going to multiply by 0.20, okay, or 20%, which is what we want to tip. And that will give us $3.71. And now the final step is basically add these 2 numbers together, the tip and the meal with the tax, and that gives you $22.26. Option C, D. All right, so Sally is an archaeologist studying ancient pyramids. She wants to find out how much space a pyramid with a base of 60 feet and a height of 80 feet occupies. All right, so the key word here is space. okay, because that's telling you that they're asking you for volume. Okay, so if they're telling you how much space something occupies, that's a keyword for volume. All right, so we're talking about a pyramid, so we would go to our formula sheet and we would look at the formula for the volume of a pyramid, which is there. So volume is 1/3 of the base multiplied by the height. Okay, and this is very easy now because you already have those that information in the question. They tell us the base is 60, the height is 80. All you have to do is multiply those numbers together. That gives you this number. So that's the volume of the pyramid, or how much space it occupies. All right, question 79. So it's asking you to simplify this. So this is, again, you have to be a little bit careful with the signs, but it's pretty straightforward. So what you want to use is the distributive property, meaning that you're going to take that negative sign there in the middle, and you're going to multiply -2 by x, and you're going to multiply -2 by 3. Okay, so when you do that, this is what you get. And then the second part is to combine like terms. Okay, so you're going to add terms that are similar. So you're going to add all terms that have an x value, right? So 5x minus 2x, that would give you 3x. And then you're going to multiply the other set of common terms. So the whole numbers, 5 minus 6, that gives you 3x minus 1, option C. Okay, question 8, we're going to do another question with a distributive property. And this one is a little bit easier because you don't have a negative sign, so there's no risk of you getting confused with the signs. Okay, so once again, we're going to take this equation and we're going to use the distributive property. So we're going to multiply +5 times 2x and +5 by -1. Okay, that gives us this. And now next step is to combine those like terms. So once again, we're going to combine all terms that are similar. So first let's look at x squared. We only have one number with an x squared, which is 14, so we don't have to do anything there. The next set of common terms are 7x and 10x, so we would add those together. And then finally we have the whole numbers again, 3 minus 5. Okay, that's the final answer, which is option A. All right, so question 81. Jim rented a snowblower at 5 a.m. and returned it at 9. He paid a total of $35.64. What was the rental cost per hour of the snowblower? All right, so the first step here is to find out how many hours he rented the snowblower, right? So basically it was 4 hours. And then all you have to do is divide the total cost, that 35.64 by 4, and that's going to tell you the cost per hour. Okay, so the correct answer would be C. Luke and Sam are training for a 10K. Below is a table of their training schedule. Find the mean. Okay, so mean, median, and mode and range, very common questions on the statistics portion. So in order to find the mean or the average, what you would do is just add everything up, right? So the number of miles, and then all you have to do is divide it by the number of days. So the average that they ran in their training was about 6.44 miles, okay, which is answer A. Okay, so the next question is a number line question, and it also has some absolute values. So it says, which expression below represents the distance between x and y on the number line? All right, so one easy way to think about number lines is to think of them like a subway line or a bus line, okay? So when you look at this number line, think, instead of thinking, x and y, think, this is my house and my job is in point y. What's the distance between these 2 points? Okay, so if you calculate the distance, it's actually 6. Okay, so there's 6 spaces between point x and point y. So 6 is going to be the answer to this question. All right, so now also remember that when you have a number line and you subtract, you move to the left. And when you add, you move to the right. So in option A, it tells you -4 minus 1. So that means you would move to the left because you're subtracting. Okay, that's -5. That's wrong because we said the answer has to be 6. Number 2, you're adding, so you would move to the right. Gives you -3, also wrong. And then option C and D, they have absolute values. Okay, so remember that when you have those vertical bars, that means it's an absolute value. Okay, so here it's telling you -4 minus 2, so you would subtract. There, my bus went off the number line. That would give you -6. But remember, you have an absolute value sign. So whenever you have these vertical bars, remember that whatever is inside those bars actually turns into a positive number. Okay, so in this case, the answer is 6, which would be the correct answer. And then answer D, just out of completion, again, you would have -4 plus 2. You move 2 to the right because you're adding. That gives you -2. Once again, you have a absolute value bars, so this -2 turns into +2, and this is incorrect. Okay, so the correct option would be C. All right, Jill owns a nail salon. She has posted the following information about her services and prices. How many minutes will it take her to give 3 bikini waxes? Okay, so in this case, this requires you to know a little bit about reading graphs. So always look at the y-axis or the vertical part. Okay, so bikini wax, and also look at the horizontal, so the minutes. So if you look at there, it says that it takes 30 minutes to give a bikini wax, and they're telling us it's 3. So multiply by 3, that gives you 90. Option C. Okay, so Joe flipped a coin 75 times and recorded his results in the table below. What is the probability of him getting tails on a coin flip? All right, so here's what you have to remember, this formula for probability ratio, okay, which says that the favorable outcomes divided by the possible outcomes, it's what's going to give you the probability. All right, so in this case, they're telling us that he flips the coin 75 times. So 75 would represent the possible number of outcomes. And then they're asking us for the probability of him getting tails. So if you look at the table, it says that would be 40. Okay, so if you divide these two numbers, it will give you the probability of him getting tails on a coin flip. Notice, though, that those numbers are pretty large, and usually they ask you to reduce them to their lowest expression. So in this case, you have to find a common denominator. In this case, it would be 5. So if you divide both numbers by 5, that would give you 8 out of 15, which is option D. Okay, so here it says, what is the sum of the coefficients in the expression below? So first of all, let's remind ourselves what a coefficient is. So the official definition is that it is a number multiplied by a variable. Okay, so in this case, you have 3, which is multiplied by the variable x. And here in front of the x, you have, even though it's not written, a number which is 1. Okay, so these two are coefficients. All right, another easy way to remember it is just to say whatever is in front of the x. Okay, but don't forget that if you just have an x, you also have a coefficient there, which would be 1. So if we go back to our expression, in this case, you have 3 coefficients, right? We have 20 in front of the x, we have the 2 in front of the x, and then we have the 1 in front of the x. So you would add all of those together, and that would give you the coefficients. The number 7 is not a coefficient, it is a constant. Paul decides to get in shape for the summer by investing in an exercise option during 5 months. He looks at 3 options to try to find the best price. Rick's Gym charges a $150 one-time membership joining fee and $8 per month. Men's Club charges $45 per month, and a personal trainer charges $150 for 4 months. Which option is correct? Okay, so this is a little bit engaged. So what you have to do is kind of break it into small pieces so that you don't get confused. So the first thing that you want to do is find out how many months he is paying for his exercise option. 2, find out the price for each option and then compare the 3 options. Okay, so I'm going to put this in a little table like this. So let's talk about Rick's gym first. So in the case of Rick's Gym, they tell us that the joining fee is $150. It's a one-time membership fee, joining fee. And then it's $8 per month, right? And they tell us in the question that he's going to be investing in this for 5 months. So all you have to do is multiply $8 times 5. That gives you $40 in total for those 5 months. And then you would add the joining fee. Okay, so Rick's Gym is $190. We're going to do the same thing for the men's club. So men's club did not have a joining fee, and it cost $45 per month. Once again, we multiply by 5 months because that's what he's going to be paying, and that gives us $225. And then finally, a personal trainer. In the question, they tell us that they charge $150 for 4 months. So what you have to do first is find out how much they charge, or he charges, for 1 month. So you would do that by dividing 150 times 4. That gives you $37.50. And then you would repeat what we did before. You would multiply that number by 5 months, which gives you 187.50 cents. And the personal trainer does not have a joining fee. Okay, so if you compare now these three, this table, you can see that the correct answer would be D, which is that the personal trainer is the cheapest option. All right, so JJ, Ross, Lisa, and Lee contributed money to buy a friend's birthday gift. Lisa and Lee gave the same amount. Ross gave $15 more than Lisa. JJ gave half as much as Ross. If the friends spend a total of $350, how much did Lisa give? All right, so the issue with these problems is that they're kind of like, the language is kind of, tricky, all right? So again, you have to break it down into kind of digestible pieces. So here we have 4 friends, right? JJ, Ross, Lisa, and Lee, and they've told us that they've spent a total of $35. Okay, so all of their expenses added together are equal to $350. Then they tell us that Lisa and Lee gave the same amount, but they don't give us any other information. So we're going to say that Lisa gave X and Lee also gave X. Okay, then they tell us that Ross gave $15 more than Lisa. So since Lisa gave X, Ross gave X plus 15. And then finally, JJ gave half as much as Ross did. So you would take the amount that Ross gave, which was X plus 15, and divide that by 2 or multiply it by 0.5. Okay, so now you have all your variables. And what you're going to do now is you're going to take these variables and you're just going to plug them into your initial equation like this. Okay, so JJ is in blue, Ross in pink, Lisa in green, and Lee in black. All right, so let's start with JJ. So he's in blue, so we would use the distributive property here. So we would multiply 0.5 times x and 0.5 by positive 15, okay? And that gives us this number. And now what you have to do is just clean up this, these numbers, meaning that you're going to add like terms together. So you're going to add all the terms that have an x value, so that's 3x and 0.5x together, and then you're going to add the whole numbers together on the other side. So ultimately you end up with this formula. And now it's pretty straightforward, right? So we want to isolate that x on the left side. So the way that we do it is by subtracting 22.5 from the left side, doing the same on the right side. And what that's going to allow us is to get rid of these two numbers. And then now we're left with this. And in order to isolate that x, you would divide by 3.5 on both sides. And that gives you that x is 39.57. Yeah. Okay, and that is option D. Lucy's total payroll deductions are 23% of her earnings. If her deductions add up to $477.99 for a 2-week period, how much were her earnings for that period? All right, so here we have to go back to this rule called the percentage rule, all right, where it says that the total multiplied by the rate or the percent gives you the part. And what we know from this question is the part, okay? So we know that during those 2-week periods, she had, they deduced a certain amount of money. And what we want to find out is the total amount of money, okay? So basically, as we said, the base or the total would be our value that we have to find out. The percentage or rate, they give us 23%, and the part is that number there. So what you're going to do is simply solve for the base or the total, and you would rearrange the equation like this. And all you have to do is now plug in these numbers that you have there on the top right, like that, and that gives you that the base total that she earned was $2,078.26. Okay, which is option C. And then another thing that you could do is just check your work, right? So if you take that base total, multiply it by 23%, which is the amount that they were deducting, it gives you $477.99, which it tells you here in the question is what they had deducted. All right, so question 90. So Jacob has to repaint his 640 square foot apartment. He calculates he has 1,500 square feet of wall space to paint. He will not paint the ceiling or floor. If 1 gallon of paint covers 150 square feet of wall space, how many gallons will he need? All right, so first of all, let's look at the wall space. Okay, so he has to cover that much wall. And they made it easy for us because they said that 1 gallon covers 150 square feet. Okay, so all you have to do now is divide these two numbers. So you would divide the amount of wall space by the amount of paint that is covered by 1 gallon of paint. And that would give you 10 gallons of paint. Okay, so they require 10 gallons of paint to cover that amount of wall space, which is answer C. All right, Bill needs to borrow $5,600 at 3.2% annual interest for 5 years to pay his car. How much will he pay in simple interest? All right, so here you have to remember this formula, which I think might be provided by the GED, but I'm not 100% sure, which says that interest is equal times the principal times the rate times the time. So principal refers to how much you borrow. The rate is going to be the percent at which you, are borrowing that amount. And then the time is going to be for how long. And what you have to remember usually is that the time is usually in years, okay, not months. So if you ever get a question where it tells you it's in months, make sure that you convert it to years. Okay, so with that in mind, oops, I got the wrong number there. Sorry. So the principal is actually 5,600, not 7,600. My apologies. The rate is 3.2% or 0.032 if we change it to decimals. And then the year is 5 years. Okay, so you would take those numbers. And again, the principal is 5,600, not 7,600. And multiply everything together. And that gives you a total interest of 896, which is option A. All right. So this is a graph with a drop-down menu question. So remember, those are the ones you just click and it drops down the possible answer options. And it asks, which month did this company have the largest amount of people on the payroll? All right, so as always, we're going to look at the title. It tells us it's employees on payroll. We look at the y-axis. It tells us the number of employees, and the x tells us the months. And if you look at June, you can see that that's where it peaked. So there were 70 employees on the payroll in June. So the correct answer would be June. All right, so once again, remember that in the GED you will have multiple choice questions, and then sometimes you also have these kind of fill in the blank questions, which are a little bit harder because you can't guess, but you do have to prepare for them because they also have a higher weight in terms of how much they count. All right, so it says, type your answer in the box. You may include numbers, symbols, and or text in your answer. Simplify the expression completely. Leave your answer in radical form. All right, so here they're asking us to multiply two square roots together. And remember, because they're asking us to simplify the expression and leave it in radical form, what that means is it has to be like the lowest expression, basically. All right, so let's remind ourselves what a square root is. So whenever you have a number with a square root symbol, you have to ask yourself, what number multiplied by itself gives me this number? Okay, so what is the square root of 25? Of 4, it would be 2, right? Of 9, it would be 3. 100 would be 10, right? And 25 would be 5. Why? Because 5 times 5 is 25, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, and 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, so remember, ask yourself what number multiplied by itself gives you that number under the square root. Okay, so if we look at 49, what is the square root of 49? What number multiplied by itself gives you 49? Yeah, 7, right? So 7 times 7 gives you 49. So the square root is 7. Okay, and the square root of 7, it doesn't have a square root, so your answer would be 7 multiplied by the square root of 7. Okay, so that is the final answer. All right, so question 94 is a question that looks at angles, and it's asking you if angle A is 40 degrees, what is the value for angle B? Okay, so remember when you look at these questions, like, excuse me, these two angles that are shown there in pink, they're both the same, okay, so they're both at 40. And the angle that is immediately in front of these angles, so that one in the top and the one in the bottom, they're also the same. Okay? So now the question is, what are these angles? So what's that angle? And what's its equivalent angle there? And these two below. All right, so here's where you have to remember that angles in a straight line are equal to 180. So if you had this shape of a straight line, you would basically add angle A, angle B, and angle C, and it would give you 180. So if we look at the line there in the bottom, we know that that line is a straight line, right? So it's going to be equal to 180. And we said that angle C is equal to 40. And, sorry, it should say B plus C is equal to 180, and B plus 40 is equal to 180. So that's a mistake. Okay, so all you have to do here is solve for B. And the way that you do that is you would subtract 40 from the left side. Once again, it shouldn't say 20 there, it should say 40. So you subtract 40 from the left side, 40 from the right side. That gives you that B is 140. Okay, so correct answer is option B. All right, so James, this is another type of question that you will see, which is called drag and drop. So it says James is making belts. He creates an equation that relates his data of men's abdomen belly size to the length of the band he needs for the belt. For male adults, he needs a band 4 times as long as the man's belly, plus 4/5 of an inch extra. Complete a linear equation where x is the size of the abdomen belly and y is the length of the band, of the belt band in inches. All right, so this looks kind of intimidating. Let me just first explain what this question in terms of the logistics are. So in the bottom there, you can see that you have these little boxes. So in the test, what you would do is you would click on the box of interest and drag it and drop it into the equation that you're interested, like that. Okay, and if, for example, you make a mistake, you just pick it up and put it back in its place. All right, so this is primarily how it works. All right, so that's the logistics. Okay, so let's go back to the question. So they're telling us that a male belt is going to be 4 times as long as the man's belly, right? So we're going to say that male is going to be 4x, where x represents the belly size, plus 4/5 of an extra inch. Okay, so what we would do is go back to our equation and kind of drag and drop. Notice that we don't have 4/5 in our answer options, so you would divide 4 by 5, and that gives you 0.8. Okay, so that's why the answer, instead of being 4x plus 4/5, it's 4x plus 0.8. Okay, question 96. Joe spends, 23 hours a week fixing cars. He spends 3 hours buying material. Each car takes about 5 hours to complete. The inequality 3 plus 5c less than 23 represents the cars Rob can fix in a week. Using the number line, plot the possible values for c. Okay, so this again is one of those questions where you actually have to interact with an image. So here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to solve the inequality, which is this one appearing there on the left. And this is pretty straightforward. Okay, so when you have an inequality, remember that you're going to treat it the same as an algebra problem. So instead of having that less than sign, just imagine it's an equal sign. Okay, and you want to isolate for x. So on the left side, you're going to subtract 3. And remember, you have to do the same thing on the right side. That leaves you with 5c less than 20. And then in order to get the value for c, you're going to divide both sides by 5. That gives you that c is minus 4. Okay, so that's step 1. And then step 2 is simply to plot this on the number line. So you would, it's telling you that it's less than 4, right? So it would be less than 4 is 3, 2, 1, and 0. Okay, so you would plot it like that, or if it allows you, you would plot kind of like a single line. But in the question you see it says plot the possible values for c. All right, question 97. So another number line. So it's telling you, using the number line below, click the location where the fraction 9/10 should be placed. Okay, and here what you have is these kind of random fractions, all right? So the first thing is to think about, where everything sits at, right? So here on the left, we have the 0, the 1/2 is the 0.5, and the 1. And they're telling us 9/10, right? So that's going to be more or less there towards the right. So if we divide 9/10, that gives us 0.9. So that's telling you that the correct answer is going to be there between 6/7 and 1. Okay, so we'd be right there. Because as you saw here, let me just go back, 6/7 is 8.6. Okay, so the correct answer is the following notch up right there. A carpenter cut 2 lengths of wood measuring 4.3 meters and 1.2 meters from an 8-meter piece wood. Assuming no wood was wasted when the cuts were made, what length in meters is the remaining piece? All right, so there on the top, you have the 8-meter piece of wood, and they're telling us that they cut one chunk to be 4.3, which you can see in the bottom line. The other chunk was 1.2, and then we have to find the remaining piece there on the right. So all of these pieces should equal 8, okay? And we have the information for 2 of them. So all you have to do now is solve for piece 3. So you would add all the length for piece 1 and 2 there on the left. That gives you 5.5. For piece x, 3, we don't know what it is, so we're just going to call it x, and all of it is equal to 8. And now it's a pretty straightforward algebra problem. You would subtract 5.5 on the left, do the same thing on the right, and that gives you that x is 2.5. Okay, so answer A. And then just always, as always, you know, if you have time, review your work. If you add 4.3 plus 1.2 plus 2.5, that should give you 8. All right, so we're coming near the end. So it says if angle B is 15 degrees more than 2 times the measure of angle C, what is the measure of B? Okay, so this is one of those tongue twister problems. First of all, let's go back to the basics. So we have this structure, which is called a four-sided plane figure. Okay, so remember what anytime you have these figures, they're equal to 360. And also remember that when you see this little triangle in any shape, that is telling you that's a right angle worth 90 degrees. So step 1, we said that all of these angles have to equal 360, right? Because it's a four-sided plane figure. And then we said that whenever you have a little box like that, that's 90 degrees. So we know that angle A and angle D are 90, okay? And now we have to find out the measure of C. And they tell us that B is twice the value for C, and plus 15, okay, not 30. Sorry, I'm making a lot of mistakes here. So it should be 2C plus 15. Okay, so the correct, it should look like this there on the left. So I just corrected it. Okay, so now that you have all your values, just plug them into the equation. Okay, so you would plug them in like that. And then, once again, what you're going to do is add all the common values. So all the values that have C are added together, right? So 2C plus C is 3C. And then you're going to add the 90, the 15, and the 90 there on the left to get 195. All right, and then as always, we're going to isolate the C by subtracting 195 from the left side. Do the same on the right side. Cancel those numbers out on the left. That leaves us with this value, and then divide both sides by 3. Tells us that C is equal to 55 degrees. Okay? So now, remember that the question is not asking you for angle C. It's asking you for the measure of angle B. So you're going to take that number you found, and you're going to plug it in this equation for angle B. So instead of having that C, you're going to put in the 55. That gives you this number, which is 125, option D. All right, and as always, make sure you check your work. So if you add up all these numbers together, it should give you 360, which we said is what a four-sided plane figure is. All right, and finally, we get to question 100. The diagram below represents a rainwater tank, collection tank. You wish to paint the exterior of the tank, so basically the sides and the base. Each gallon of paint covers 40 square meters. How many gallons of paint are required to paint the tank? All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to find the surface area of a cone, okay, because this is the shape. And you can find that in the test, okay, in your formula sheet. So the surface area is pi multiplied by the radius squared plus pi multiplied by the radius and the length. All right, so we know from the question that the radius is, that the diameter, okay, so the distance across there in the top is 40. Okay, so remember that the radius is half the diameter, so it would be 20. And then they're telling us that the length is 55 meters. Okay, so you would plug those numbers in like that. This gives you this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to multiply by pi. All right, so pi is that little symbol that looks like a table, and it is 3.14. Okay, so you have to remember that number. So now if you multiply those numbers and then add them together like this, it gives you that this is the surface area. All right, so that's the total area that you're going to have to paint. All right, so that was step 1. And now you're going to have to find out how many gallons you need. So it tells us in the question that each gallon covers 40 square meters. So all you would do is take that surface area you just found, divide by 40 square meters. That gives you that value, which is option B. And that's it, folks. Congratulations if you made it this far, and thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your time. If you found any value or you think anybody might enjoy this, please subscribe or send it to your friends and family. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day or evening.